Chapter 251. Soul-devouring tree. Did Stella go anywhere else? Dante asked Knox as the wind rushed past them. No idea, Knox said as the flying sword shot toward the mountain peak. My technique can only track the lingering shadow she left behind for a week. After that, it becomes too weak to accurately track. Still a handy skill. Indeed, Knox agreed, though it only works at night, so we are lucky the sun has only just started rising, and it's stupidly chi-intensive. Or at least it was when I was in the Star Core realm. I probably shaved a few hours off my life using it, but I don't have the time to ask around and track her down. Knox snapped her fingers, and a bubble of shadow surrounded them and obscured them from view as they got closer. This place is guarded by titans of wood that attacked me last time. Keep your head low when we land. We don't want to attract their attention. Dante was about to ask what they looked like, but then they flew past something towering over the trees. It had been stationary before, so he hadn't noticed it, but he knew it was strong as it swept the surroundings with blazing eyes of purple soul fire embedded in the face of black wood. What in the 9 realms is that? Dante whispered. That was the easiest one to deal with, Knox replied. The worst was one made from the void. It killed one of my fellow merchants in one hit before he could even react. Dante frowned. The void affinity was rare. So rare, in fact, that he hadn't heard of anyone outside his family wielding it. Yet this place had enslaved void monsters. Just who were they dealing with? I don't think this is a good idea at all, Dante thought as they crossed over a mist wall that shrouded the mountain peak. If not for my dependence on Knox for survival, I would rather we run off to the tainted cloud sect together right now and forget about Stella. But with Knox's soul being cursed, we have no choice. I don't feel the presence of that powerful spatial cultivator anymore, Knox muttered as she scrutinized the giant demonic tree that loomed over the mountain peak. Did they leave? Dante wasn't sure who she was referring to, but this place was creepy. It was deathly silent except for the rustling of leaves, and the wall of mist between the trees was odd. Stella was last seen over here. Knox floated the sword near a strange fog that seemed contained near a giant hole that dominated the center of the mountain and hopped off, with Dante following close behind. There's nobody here, Knox dispelled the bubble of shadows that had been obscuring them. I checked with my spiritual sense, and the nearest cultivator should be over on the other mountain, and I doubt they will detect us. So what now? Dante asked. If Stella's shadow hasn't been here for a week, maybe she is long gone. Knox withdrew the sword into her spatial ring and dropped to one knee. She traced the spot where Stella's shadow must have been during her shadow search technique, but it was nothing but stone now. There are 2 options, Knox said. Either Stella teleported so far away that it was beyond my technique, or she went into this strange fog. Have you seen a fog like this before? Knox shook her head. It seems artificial. Perhaps held together with a runic formation running under the stone. Wait, are these shards? Shards. Yeah. Doesn't it look like there are shards of glass floating around in this fog? Knox stepped closer and squinted at it. A gasp of surprise escaped her lips, and she stumbled back. Are those all pocket realms? How could there possibly be so many gathered in one place? Dante took a look for himself, and she seemed correct. He had seen a gate for a pocket dimension before when he had visited Nitro's city with his father. Back when he was still a respected family member. So Stella might have gone into one of these pocket realms, Dante suggested. Should we follow her? Well, unless she suddenly appears, I don't have a choice. Knox narrowed her eyes, but there are so many. How would I know which one she went in? Knox fell silent for a moment as the sun illuminated the mountain peak. Dante thought she was weighing her options, but her head suddenly snapped toward the giant hole. They know we are here. Knox stood up with shadow flames manifesting in her palms. Who? Dante glanced toward the hole and felt what Knox had. Many chi types were flying at them as if a whole group of noble families had been waiting in the darkness. A freezing aura that knocked the wind out of his lungs and made his hands and face instantly numb overcame him. It was followed up by thick green vines that exploded from the ground and wrapped tightly around his limbs. Dante's soul core flared up, and with a single pulse of void chi, the vines disintegrated, and the intense chill ceased, just in time for a wave of spatial chi to push him backward with enough force to lose his balance. To save himself from falling on the stone, he tried to use void step, but to his utter surprise, something was suppressing him. It was as if his soul was locked in place, preventing any movement. When did they even cast these techniques? Dante thought as he hit the ground and pushed himself back up with a frown. Usually, the gathering of chi is noticeable before a technique is even cast. But it was as if they came instantly. Knox walked past him with a cape of liquid shadow laid out in her wake. She spread her arms and announced, "Shadows, heed my call." Nightmarish fiends with spindly limbs and claws crawled out from the shadows and gathered around. Having gathered a small army, Knox pointed to the hole. "Devour anyone you find." The fiends surged forward at the command toward the hole. Dante examined their destination and noticed a strange stone building built upon a pillar in the center. What struck him as odd was how its roof was open so a scarlet-leaved tree could grow through. Now that I think about it, wasn't there a red leaf tree present at the alchemy tournament? Dante wondered. His eyes widened as fire chi exploded out from the tree, and a wall of flames consumed the incoming fiends instantly. Tisk! Knox clicked her tongue. The sunlight weakened my creations, and they also have fire cultivators hidden over there. This is going to be trouble. So. Knox froze mid-sentence as Dante felt a sudden, tremendous presence weigh upon him as if the entire mountain had come to life. He instinctually tried to void step away but he couldn't. His soul was still locked in place. Unauthorized use. This story is on Amazon without permission from the author. Report any sightings. What kind of monster have we awoken? Dante wondered as he slowly turned toward the source and stared down the demonic tree that lorded over the peak. The ground began to tremble, and two titans made their appearance. One he had seen earlier as they flew in, but the other was even more memorable. It had been the one that attacked Slemir alongside a blonde-haired girl with a mask. "We have to hide." Knox grabbed his arm and shrouded them in shadows. Ashlock awoke to the rising sun and slowly shrugged off the deep sleep he had enjoyed under the 9 moons. Is today the day the mystic realm ends? Ashlock yawned as his body woke up. It's been so boring waiting for them to return. Idletree daily sign in system. Day 3596. Daily credit 33. Sacrifice credit 1865. Sign in. Ashlock sleepily did the maths and confirmed today was the day. It had been a week, and he could finally see how much his sect had grown. He also hoped to welcome thousands of new mudcloaks and his new ent. His slow morning was interrupted when a wave of fear overtook him. "Quill, what's wrong?" Ashlock blurted out through the root network as he left the confines of his mind, spread out his spiritual sight, and blanketed the area in his presence. It had been so quiet all week he had gotten lazy, but this seemed like a serious situation. For the briefest moment, he saw Knox before she vanished into the shadows alongside someone else he didn't catch. There were signs that Quill had been keeping them at bay with his defensive techniques, as frost covered the roughed-up ground and a swirling wall of flame shrouded the library. "So the cockroach merchant has returned," Ashlock cursed. It was too early in the morning to deal with such an annoying person. He had thrown everything he had at her so many times, and yet she always managed to escape. Ashlock couldn't directly locate her, but he had a vague idea since she was hiding in the shadows within his realm of influence. Activating abyssal whispers and targeting the general area, he reawakened the seed within Knox's mind. To his surprise, her consciousness was far harder to penetrate than last time, but he managed. "There's no use in running and hiding, Knox," Ashlock said within her mind, without holding back on the hallucinations like he usually did when talking with his sect members. "Don't you know that I can see you?" To further the point and get a better lock on her location, Ashlock opened his demonic eye. The world took on a red hue, and he could see the flow of chi, which made the blazing ball of shadow chi stick out like a sore thumb. Penetrating it with his gaze, he saw Knox standing beside Dante Voidmint. What they were doing here, he didn't know. But there was a bigger issue. That level of chi coming from Knox was beyond even him. Knox is in the nascent soul realm. Shit. When did that happen? No wonder it felt so hard to penetrate her consciousness. She is a whole fucking realm above me. Ashlock couldn't believe he had just revealed himself to someone stronger than him. What was he supposed to do now? That accursed gaze. Knox dispelled her sphere of shadows, revealing herself and Dante to the world. "You're the one who cursed me, right? You are the soul-devouring tree. So that is why she is here," Ashlock muttered to himself. If her only goal is to rid herself of the curse, then she is in for some bad news, as the only way to dispel curses is some kind of antidote which I don't have in killing the caster of the curse. And I don't plan to die so easily. Knox wreathed herself in blazing flames of shadow and shot toward him with her sword tip pointing at his eye. With no time to close his eyelid of wood to protect his weak spot, he went on the defensive. "Do you think I fear a cockroach like you?" Ashlock taunted to further the hallucinations as he quickly opened his dimensional overlap menu, and without time to look or adjust the settings, he summoned the strongest light realm he could. 1100 credits vanished from his account, which he had gotten from devouring thousands of kobolds, and an intense bubble of light expanded out. Perish before me. Knox reeled back her attack as Ashlock dropped a light realm on her head that obliterated her conjured shadows and caused her to scream out in surprise. If not for Quill having her soul locked down with spatial lock, Knox could have used Shadow Step to take out his eye instantly and avoid the light realm. But she had been left with no choice but to charge at him. Ashlock's spiritual sight was blinded by the peak star core light chi, but his demonic eye could gaze through it without issue. He saw that Dante had been completely taken out as the man had fallen to the floor and was trying to fight back and blink away the light. But Knox was a different story. The initial wave of light chi may have wiped out her conjured armor of shadows and made her cease her attack on his eye, but other than that, she seemed unfazed. Ashlock knew from the way she glared at him with an oddly youthful face he didn't remember her having in her overwhelming confidence, despite being bathed in a realm of chi that should counter her, that something bad was about to happen. Titus and Zeus, attack her now, Ashlock commanded as he removed his limiter on his star core. Now wasn't the time to conserve his chi output. It was time to go all out. His body surged with power as chi rose up through the roots from thousands of his offspring spread throughout the land that had been cultivating under the 9 moons every night. His own star core also pulsed with power as lilac soul flames exploded, covering his bark and leaves in a column reaching for the stars. He then slammed his entire presence and gaze upon Knox and Dante while casting Consuming Abyss. More sacrificial credits vanished from his balance, but he didn't care. He would go to 0 if it meant he could get revenge on those who had hurt his sect members deeply. The void lake spread out at a high cost due to the light chi, and tendrils rose from the darkness alongside black vines wielding swords. Ashlock infused the swords with warp strike, which allowed them to hit from unexpected angles or bypass defenses by momentarily warping space. Dante dropped to one knee from the pressure, but Knox stood tall and amusedly eyed all the incoming attacks. It was not exactly the reaction Ashlock had been hoping for. He grew even more concerned when multiple lightning bolts rained down upon Knox, and she simply shrugged them off. You can't escape the light, Knox, Ashlock insisted. His A-grade, abyssal whispers, skill amplified his words with hallucinations, so he chose words that would maximize the impact of his attacks. The light only fears one thing, Knox replied as she raised her hands, an all-consuming darkness. A tidal wave of liquid shadow surged from Knox's hands and devoured the light chi Ashlock had summoned. Within seconds, it was all gone. The light had been consumed and replaced with darkness. Dimensional overlap destroyed. Knox began walking toward him. She met the void tendrils with summoned fiends of shadow, her sword wreathed in soul flames cleaved through his black vines as if they were misbehaving snakes. His swords bit into her skin, drawing blood, but Knox simply ignored them and let the darkness heal her. But he could see that this immense power was not coming for free. Knox's movements grew sluggish, and he could see the skin on the back of her hands transitioning to wood. The curse ate her alive, but Ashlock worried he would die first. He felt his branches creak under immense gravity as she approached. It was as if the sky had fallen upon him. So this is the power of a nascent soul cultivator, Ashlock hissed as he used his own 8th stage star core chi to try and fight back to little success. His chi quantity may be more than Knox's due to his tree-sized star core, but his ability to focus it all on such a tiny person compared to his expansive body was beyond his level of control. The best he could do was blanket the area and hope to slow her down. Knox eventually came to a stop before his trunk with her sword pointing at his eye that he hadn't closed as it would render him blind in this darkness. Now tell me, soul-devouring tree, how to rid my soul of your curse, and I may spare your life. Knox narrowed her eyes, or die. Ashlock thought how best to answer as he felt the sun fully illuminate the mountain peak. He then felt a presence rocketing toward him, and he knew his answer. I pick the third option, Ashlock replied as lightning continued to hammer down on Knox, surviving for my daughter. You're what? Knox asked, but then coughed up a mouthful of blood as a blade poked out of her chest. She turned her head to look over her shoulder at the blonde girl who materialized behind her with spatial step. Stella's eyes were tranquil, and her aim was true. Her bloodline had clearly activated. Knox's eyes narrowed. It's you. So what if it's me? Stella replied calmly as she twisted her blade still inside Knox's chest. Don't you dare hurt Tree. Knox reached up and snapped off the end of the sword with her bare hand and grinned with blood coating her teeth. Make me. Chapter 252. Turning over a new leaf. Knox looked into Stella's tranquil eyes and had more questions than answers. The curse had been an enigma from the start. Its immunity to the void aside, it was unrecorded in the Eternal Pursuit Pavilion's archives. Therefore, her only lead to a cure had been Stella, the one who had cursed her in the first place. Yet the girl who went by different names had seemingly vanished a week ago from this peak and was nowhere to be found. It wasn't until the demonic tree which lorded over this mountain peak opened its trunk and revealed its eye that Knox started to see the bigger picture. One could tell a lot from another's gaze, and from the demonic eye hidden within the tree, Knox learned that it was otherworldly. An unrecorded being with insight into things outside of current cultivator understanding. Just like the curse. Which is why she concluded that Stella wasn't the source of the curse, but rather it was this demonic tree. Therefore, Knox switched targets. If she could eliminate the source of the curse, then maybe she would be set free. However, to her surprise, the moment the tree was threatened, it called upon its daughter, and the very girl she had been looking for appeared out of thin air and rammed a sword through her chest. Knox narrowed her eyes at Stella and wondered if the girl was even human. Her face seemed too flawless. She appeared to switch between being a reincarnated sword goddess with a tranquil gaze and perfect movements to a reckless, untrained girl at a moment's notice. Through Stella's white clothing and around her wrists, Knox could see the outline of tattoos curling down Stella's arms that looked similar to the blackthorn vines that the demonic tree had used to try and kill her. You should have never returned to this place after what you did, Stella said calmly, and Knox noticed the maple leaf earrings hanging from her ears. It's not like I wanted to return here, but you gave me little choice. Knox walked forward and felt the cold metal blade leave her body. This tree here cursed me. A curse so vicious nothing can rid me of it. So I ask you, is there a cure? Stella discarded her broken and bloodied sword to the ground like trash, and in a flash of silver, she summoned a black sheath embroidered in a golden star pattern. She slowly pulled the blade from its sheath and spoke while meeting her gaze, there never was a cure. Ever since the day you ate that pill, you have been destined to turn into a tree. Knox felt her heart sink in her chest. However, even if there was a cure, Stella pointed the tip of her sword at her, I would never give it to you. Such mercy is not fit for someone willing to do anything for their own greed at the cost of everyone else. Then you have left me with no choice. Knox pulled on the two star cores in her chest that were joined in harmony with the very curse that was eating her from within. If Stella wants to ram a sword through my heart in revenge, and this tree wants nothing more than to eat me alive, then I will rid myself of this curse in the only way I know how, by killing its creator. Shadow chi surged through every inch of her body alongside the curse. The immense power generated by two star cores working in harmony came at the cost of her skin hardening into wood and painful roots burrowing through her legs. But she didn't care. This would be her final stand. Either she emerged victorious and retained her humanity, or her corpse would serve as fertilizer for the tree she was supposedly destined to become. Shadow armor wrapped around every inch of her body as she stared down Stella and refocused the gravity of her presence entirely on her. Kneel as you helplessly watch your father die for your arrogance. Stella tried to resist the focused pressure, but eventually, her shaking legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor. Blood trickled from the corners of her mouth as she strained her neck to glare at her. You bitch, Stella hissed through gritted teeth. Don't you dare hurt him. Knox snorted as she turned her back to Stella. Only those with power get to make demands like that. You may be something else under that skin, but you are still a star core weakling. Know your place. Stepping toward the tree with her sword drawn, Knox ignored the lightning strikes that struck her shadow armor and destroyed the surrounding stone. The void tendrils that lashed out at her could be blasted away with waves of shadow, and the black vines were distracted by shadow fiends. There was nothing that could stop her. This was what absolute power felt like. If only it hadn't come at the cost of her life coming closer to its end with every passing second. Knox raised her arms with difficulty due to how stiff they had become and frowned when she saw that the darn tree had closed its eye in fear. It now appeared like any other overgrown tree, but Knox knew its secrets. If the tree refuses to watch its own demise like its dear daughter, wouldn't it be more fitting if they got to embrace each other in death? Knox mused as she changed the planned trajectory of her swing. If she hit here, the tree would fall forward and crush Stella, who could hardly keep her head up, let alone raise her hands or sword under Knox's focused pressure. Even if I die, I am taking these two with me one way or another. The more brutal, the better. No, don't, Stella shouted from behind, but Knox didn't care. With all her strength, she swung her sword wreathed in shadow at the tree in a horizontal slash. The blade bit deep into the wood in a shower of black splinters, and Knox felt the entire tree shake from the force. The ground around her cracked as the tree tilted slightly to one side, and hundreds of fruits rained down like hail. Loud cracks followed a moment later as broken branches followed the fruits. My sword only managed to make it around a third of the way through. Knox concluded with some surprise. A sword certainly wasn't the tool used by lumberjacks for good reason, but she felt one fully empowered strike should have been enough. Curious, she put her hand in the lilac flames and confirmed her assumption. This certainly is one strong tree. Near the Star Core Realm's peak, it's no wonder its bark is so tough. Another hit or two should finally down it. A scream came from behind, and Knox grinned as she saw how distraught Stella was. The girl was coughing blood as she tried to stand. Purple soul fire raged all around her, but it was useless. Are you sure you still wouldn't give me the cure to the curse? Knox laughed as she shook off the black sap stuck to her blade and prepared for another swing. There's no need. Stella coughed. You will be dead, soon. Nobody hurts tree and lives. He can't die. Oh. Knox raised a brow. And who is supposed to stop me? Stella strained her neck and glared at her without saying anything. Knox had to admit that something contained within that gaze had shifted from before. But she still wasn't convinced. You keep watching. I wouldn't want you to miss this. Knox grinned as she pulled back her arms to strike again while ignoring the terrible stiffness that had worsened in such a short time. Taking an awkward swing as her muscles locked up, her blade bit into the wood, but rather than digging deeper, there was a loud clang of metal and a shower of sparks. Gazing down, Knox was surprised at what had stopped her attack. It was Stella. The girl was crouched down with her sword held overhead to meet her attack. The purple soul fire raging around her was in the 6th stage, which didn't make any sense. When they had first fought, Stella had barely stepped into the realm. What the? Knox muttered in disbelief as Stella glared at her from below. Blood pooled at the corner of her lips, her eyes contained a tranquil fury, and the tips of her blonde hair had turned a snow white. I told you, Stella coughed blood, don't hurt tree if you value your life. It might not be me, but someone will stop you. Why couldn't you just stay put and accept your death? Knox kicked Stella square in the chest, sending her flying with an audible crunch. While the girl lay sprawled out in a broken mess on the stone, Knox pulled her sword free from the tree and balanced it on her shoulder. My body is too seized up to take another 2 swings. Knox rolled her shoulders to try and alleviate the stiffness, to no avail. Fuck it, I will just kill the bitch first and then get Dante to help me with the tree. In the distance, she could feel that Dante was busy avoiding being squashed by the black wood titan. He had landed a few good hits on one of its legs, so it was immobilized, but it could still punch through portals. Knox strode over to Stella while trying to avoid limping and felt the pressure from the demonic tree's star core become more focused. The spatial chi around her began to fluctuate. How cute. It's trying to fight the inevitable. Knox thought as a portal opened beside her head, and many black vines surged through. She simply grasped them in her hand and tore them apart in a shower of black sap that rained upon her. She didn't think much of it until the curse within her body reacted to it and grew stronger. Wait, this sap, is this the source of the curse? Knox shook off the cursed sap from her hand and continued her trudge over to Stella. Panic was beginning to set in. Her body wasn't moving like she wanted, and a strange technique prevented her from using movement techniques like shadow step to close the gap. This narrative has been purloined without the author's approval. Report any appearances on Amazon. The slow loss of mobility terrified her. I can't move or feel my fingers anymore. They are fused together around the hilt of my sword. Knox arrived before Stella and glared down at the broken and bloodied girl who had caused all of this. She awakened her greed by flaunting those powerful artifacts. Showed her powerful pills so she wouldn't question the cursed one and then gave her false hope by mentioning an antidote that didn't even exist. You know Stella, it didn't have to end this way, Knox said as she loomed over with her sword raised. You could have simply let the artifact go. You could have stayed away so I could cut down this overgrown tree. You could have given me a fucking cure. But no, you would rather die in such a pointless way. This chapter was first shared on the N0VEL-BJN platform. The artifact was a gift from Tree, which protected me when he could not. Stella spat back. I came back when I felt Tree was in danger. As a life without him is not worth living, and there is no cure to the curse because I couldn't be bothered to make one. Your life isn't one worth saving. Nobody will miss you, and nobody is coming to save you. Knox paused as she felt her life flash through her mind. Hundreds of years passed in an instant. Friends turned to foes. Family sacrificed for lovers. She searched for someone who could refute Stella's claims, but she was right. There really was no one who would come and save her except one man. A man she hated and had run from in the past. Bold words for someone about to be decapitated. Knox sneered as she shook the thoughts away. You claim nobody will save me, but speak for yourself. Look at your treasured tree's vain attempts to protect you. Tree's strengths lie elsewhere. Stella shouted. He nurtures and cares for those around him. Not everything is about personal power. You naive child. Knox shook her head in regret that she had been brought to this point by such a fool. There is nothing in this world you can rely on but your own two hands. Consider this a lesson from me you can take to hell. You threatened the wrong person. 1,000 overlapped voices declared within her mind, and the white fog that had hung around the edge of her consciousness flashed a dark red. Fear suffocated Knox's brain, and she faltered in her attack. The last time the spirit tree had uttered such arrogance, it had struck. Knox spread out her spiritual sense, and sure enough, she felt a large gathering of chi beyond the area of shadows she had conjured to devour the light. Oh shit. Knox focused her defenses in her chest as the surrounding darkness was obliterated by a concentrated beam of light. She crossed her arms to resist the beam as she stumbled backward from Stella. A 3-meter-tall creature of gray wood with many arms that supported a floating sun that illuminated the world walked forward. It paused beside Stella and bent down to gently feed her a wisp of light. Dante, take this monster out. Knox yelled as she tried to stop the light from eating through her arms and face. Its intensity reminded her of Lucius. Wait. Did they turn Lucius into a monster? Knox's eyes widened. Everything matched up. The monster may differ in every way, but the way it walked and the care it showed Stella was very reminiscent of how Lucius had been while alive. Knox didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Here she was turning into some accursed tree, and the person standing in her way from achieving freedom from the curse was her old merchant partner Lucius, who had suffered a similar fate. A lance of void from Dante's direction cleaved silently through the air and hit the gray wood monster. It tried to block with a few of its arms to little success. The void tore through it, leaving a gaping hole and causing the monster to fall on its side. Knox was finally freed from the light beam, but things weren't looking good. Her whole body felt seized up, and she could not exert the same pressure on the surroundings as her star cores became overwhelmed by the curse. The clearest example of her rapidly declining power was Stella, who stood before her, fully healed and resisting the pressure of Knox's star cores that had previously crushed her to the floor. The blonde girl didn't waste a second and vanished in a pulse of spatial chi. Knox felt the ripple in the world's chi but could not react to Stella appearing beside her and slashing at her arm with 2 black wood-handle daggers. Pain shot through Knox's body as her arm dropped to the ground, but she managed to twist her other arm and hit Stella in the back with the hilt of her sword with such force it sent the girl spiraling through the air until she impacted the trunk of the demonic tree. Head first. Know your place, insect. Knox hissed as she used darkness absorption to begin regrowing her arm. She tried to step toward the girl but almost tripped over her own legs as they locked up. Glancing down in horror, Knox saw that her feet had hardened into black wood, and she could not take another step. No, I should have had more time. Knox knew the process had begun, but she had been convinced she would find a solution. But with her soul locked in place, preventing movement techniques, and her legs turning to wood, her chances of survival were growing thin. Fuck you, Stella. Knox raised both her arms and unleashed everything she could think of without limit. This is all your fault. Fiends of Shadow rode a tidal wave of shadow flames that reached 20 meters high toward Stella and the tilting demonic tree. Knox felt her eyes twitch as she saw Stella stand up and calmly face the incoming assault with a sword wreathed with spatial flames and that inhuman, tranquil gaze. There is nothing I can't cut, Stella slashed down. Reality tore apart, and the wave of shadows passed Stella and the tree on either side, uselessly hitting the mist wall. How the fuck? Knox was about to hurl her sword at Stella while she was mid-attack, but Knox suddenly felt something approach quickly from behind, followed by a searing hot pain in her chest. Looking down, she saw 10 claws poking through as she was swept off her feet and pulled up into the sky. Despite how I look, I am usually against killing people. Knox heard a woman say over the roaring wind. Looking over her shoulder, she faced a woman with fangs, eyes as black as the void, and long hair that flowed in the wind. 2 massive raven wings spread out from her back, and a strange mist surrounded them, which dulled her spiritual senses. The demon met her gaze. But you hurt Stella and Ashlock. The 2 people I care for most in this world. So for that, you will have to die. Knox struggled against the claws digging into her chest, but it was useless. This woman had terrifying strength despite her low cultivation level. Is this really how I die? Knox looked to the horizon and saw the rising sun. A thing she had avoided most of her life as she hid in the shadows, but in this moment, she wanted nothing more than to enjoy its warm embrace just a little longer. Life was so beautiful. I don't want to die. Knox thought about apologizing as she faced death but felt the words die in her throat. She knew she had been in the wrong, but the Ashfallen sect had also cursed her with no plans of providing a cure. Neither side was good or bad. It was simply the victor who wrote history, and despite her advantages, she had lost. They paused briefly in the air before Knox felt the demon woman change their trajectory toward the ground, which would serve as her grave. She couldn't even twist her neck or blink her eyes as her body succumbed to the curse. This was the end. Might as well go out with a bang. Knox couldn't even grin as she set one of her star cores to go supernova. Meanwhile, her infant soul broke free from her mortal vessel. It was a surreal experience to watch and feel herself being smashed into the ground by a demon as she floated aimlessly overhead. The demon tore her body to shred limb from limb while black chi poured from her mouth, ears, and eyes as her star core went supernova. Eventually, the demon relented its assault and stood aside as the demonic tree devoured the body with void tendrils. Knox had felt the pain with one soul and watched her own death with her other. Her anger and rage oddly faded as her body vanished, and she was reduced to nothing but a floating soul. Perhaps it was because half of her existence had been devoured, and the remaining half didn't have the memories or emotions needed to stay angry. It all felt so pointless now. Knox saw Stella and the demon switch targets from her to Dante, who found himself surrounded by members of the Redclaw family and confronting a rose gold-haired woman who had oddly similar facial features to Dante. Where do you think you are going? Knox heard the tree speak to her soul. Did you think you could escape while your body blew up to kill me and everyone I love? You misunderstand. Knox sighed. I have no second body prepared, and this soul will succumb to your curse soon. My death is assured, and I have nowhere to run. I just wanted to bid myself goodbye and go out with a bang. Stella was right. Nobody came to save me, and nobody will care now that I am gone. I am all alone in my final moment. You can kill me now. Knox wasn't sure why she felt the need to offload her thoughts to the very being that had just devoured her body and soul. But who else did she have to talk to in her final moments? You have regrets. Knox was confused by the question. Yes, many. I was just too blind to see them before. The voices fell silent, so Knox simply floated there, enjoying the sunlight, possibly for the last time. I, too, had regrets when I faced death. The tree finally declared. I wondered if I had approached life correctly. My thoughts endlessly spiraled, and I wallowed in despair. I truly thought it was the end and was burdened with many regrets. But that is where you and me differ. How so? Knox asked. Rather than going into the cold loneliness of death, I was saved at the last moment by someone I cared deeply about. Stella offered me another chance at life. 1,000 voices replied. That is how we differ. Stella depended on me, so she found a way to bring me back. Meanwhile, you have lived for nobody but yourself. A life of selfishness. So there is nobody to help you back up when you fall. Knox hated how the tree was right. She really had led such a lonely and pointless life where she did nothing but kill, steal, and cheat her way to the peak of power. For what? She ended up dying all the same. Just alone and with regrets. Must have been nice to have someone to care for you at the end, Knox said. Sadly, I will die alone. This is the fate I deserve. I won't let you die. The tree declared, and Knox felt a force wrap around her. Knox couldn't understand. They had been mortal enemies. She had done so many terrible things to it and its close ones. You won't kill me. Why? Don't misunderstand. I don't care for you like Stella did for me. Your body served as nourishment while your soul will serve me for eternity to repay for what you have done. The tree replied, as a tree at the nascent soul level, you will feed me chi and serve as the guardian tree of Ashfallen City. Knox felt the world blur around her as she was pulled over the mountain range at immense speed until she crashed into the side of a mountain surrounded by stone huts. Just eat my soul. Let me go. Knox howled as she felt her soul convulse as roots spread out into the dirt and wood began to form. I don't want to live as a fucking tree. I believe everyone should have a second chance at life. The tree replied, sometimes it takes facing death to see one's mistakes and grow into a better person. You may not appreciate my mercy today, but with time, you will come to see life in a new light as a tree. Trust me, it's not that bad. Knox screamed as her soul was stretched and morphed into something else. She rose from the dirt toward the sun as a column of black bark with a desire for the sun. While fading in and out of consciousness. By the end of the day, as the sun dipped below the mountains, she had grown into a 10-meter tall tree with black bark and leaves. The wind rustled through her leaves as she overlooked a city of curious mortals. To her surprise and horror, her mind remained mostly intact. She could even wield her techniques from when she had been human, as she still had a shadow affinity star core. She could kill all of these filthy mortals, but she didn't want to. Perhaps her emotions had dulled since turning into a tree, but she just wanted to sleep. Maybe I will be able to turn over a new leaf, Knox thought as she drifted into a long sleep. Chapter 253, Inner World. Through all the chaos of the fight, Ashlock had kept one thing in the back of his mind: to make sure that Knox's infant soul didn't manage to escape. He wasn't sure how it worked with nascent souls and what this infant soul would look like, so he kept his demonic eye peeled, which he had reopened when Diana came in and took Knox to the skies. While everyone else was hurt and angry, he ignored the pain in his trunk from being almost chopped in half and tried to keep calm as he glared at Knox. Sure enough, one of the star cores within Knox began to go supernova while the other phased out and stayed floating high in the sky. Even as Diana slammed Knox's body into the mountain peak, causing a shower of rubble and a crater to form and begin tearing her apart, he kept his focus on Knox's soul. But Knox's infant soul simply floated there. To his spiritual sense, and he assumed to everyone else, it was invisible, but in the gaze of his demonic eye, it was a blazing ball of shadow and so much more. It flickered and burned with personality. Somehow, the more he watched, the more he understood it. If before the soul had burned with rage, it was now calm and simply watching the world pass by. Ashlock tried to reach out to the soul, but it was intangible, like attempting to grasp a cloud of steam. But there was one thing he could latch onto: the black roots growing out from it like tentacles. The curse devouring the soul was very much tangible, and he could use telekinesis on it. Since it wasn't going anywhere, while keeping an eye on it, Ashlock used Consuming Abyss on Knox's body that was going supernova to avoid being blown up. The black vines and void tendrils of his skill worked in harmony to devour her clothes, flesh, and blood. To Ashlock's surprise, the void tendrils could not rid Knox's corpse of his cursed sap, but the digestive fluid from his black vines devoured it like everything else without issue. So, there had been a cure to his curse all along. Even in death, you were useful, Ashlock muttered as he returned his focus to the soul floating overhead while he waited for Knox's corpse to be fully devoured. He could drag it down here with telekinesis and eat it for sacrificial credits, but that felt wasteful. I have yet to see my curse actually succeed in turning someone into a tree, and wouldn't a nascent soul level tree feed me loads of chi and work great as a bastion? Worst case, he could just use Consuming Abyss on her once she became a tree for sacrificial credits. I wonder how much personality and memories she will maintain once she succumbs to the curse. Ashlock mused. He could already tell she had changed by how the floating soul flickered and dimmed. Deciding to discover how much she had changed, he spoke to her through abyssal whispers. To his surprise, she could hold a conversation, but she was like a different person. More sentimental and thoughtful, less hate and rage filled. It was almost scary how much she reminded him of himself when he had faced death after the Tao storm, so Ashlock did something even he hadn't expected he would do after everything she had done. He gave her a second chance. But it was certainly a twisted form of mercy. She would be stripped of her human body and stuck into the body of a tree. Forced to watch over Ashvallen City, populated by the mortals as its guardian tree. After concluding his conversation with Knox, he used telekinesis to plant her in the raised area of Ashvallen City so Julian could keep an eye on her. I will turn her into a bastion after I confirm how turning into a tree has affected her, Ashlock pondered, but for now, other things are demanding my attention. Red Vine Peak is still a mess, and Dante is still alive. Before he had left to plant Knox's soul, the sunlight had caused the mystic realm to collapse and slowly pull everyone from it one by one, like last time. Stella had emerged first, followed by Diana, who had helped him defeat Knox. A few minutes later, the Redclaws, Elaine, Larry, Kata, Douglas, and the thousands of Mudcloaks had arrived and surrounded Dante. There was no way for the Voidman Scion to emerge triumphant, so he left it in their hands. Returning to Red Vine Peak, the system notified Ashlock of how many sacrificial credits killing Knox had rewarded him. Plus 1-800 SC. It was a significant amount. Ashlock hadn't seen a number that high in a long time as prey of a higher realm became more challenging to come by and defeat. With Knox's body and soul absorbed, Ashlock tried to control the chaotic chi surging through his body. There was so much it felt like he had opened a floodgate as the chi absorbed from Knox's body rushed into his soul core, making it rapidly expand to its limit and then pulse with power. The entire mountain peak glowed with spatial flames, and Ashlock experienced a wave of excitement from his thousands of offspring as an event he had been waiting for occurred. He went up a cultivation stage. Demonic demi-divine tree, age 9. Star core. Ninth stage. Soul type. Amethyst, spatial. He now stood at the peak of the star core realm. Yet the rush of power didn't stop. He had been close to reaching the next stage, so ascending to the ninth stage wasn't surprising, but it kept going. His star core continued to expand and expand until he felt his trunk begin to struggle to contain his soul. You reached the threshold for the nascent soul realm. Ashlock mentally blinked at the system message floating in his mind. He knew that reaching the peak of star core was half the journey to ascending to nascent soul, as he had fought with many peak star core cultivators, but Knox had been the first nascent soul he had ever faced. They were incredibly rare with the power to rule over entire sects, so simply getting enough chi was the first step. Will I need to form a second soul now? Ashlock wondered. How did that even work, and would the fact he is a tree affect things? I suppose using progeny dominion all the time makes splitting my soul through a supernova less intimidating. I also have nocturnal genesis to heal any soul damage. Ascension to nascent soul realm requires the creation of an inner world. An inner world. Ashlock was confused. Not a second soul. What even is an inner world? Is it like a realm created inside myself? Your soul size, unique capabilities, and divine nature have qualified you to create an inner world. Do you wish to begin the creation process? Ashlock didn't see a reason to hesitate, so he accepted the system prompt. Immediately, he felt something wrong, so he looked within himself. His star core was changing. Chi was being siphoned off, deconstructed into raw, untamed chi, and then gathering into a loose cloud that converged inside his star core. As he fed more and more chi into the cloud, it started to condense but never turned into something solid, no matter how hard he tried. It simply remained as a cloud of chaotic, untamed chi. Chaos nebula formed. So this strange cloud of untamed chi inside my own soul is a chaos nebula. Ashlock wondered. Other than absorbing a lot of his chi in the most inefficient way possible, he hadn't seen much point in it so far. Requirements to turn chaos nebula into an inner world. 2565 10,000th sacrificial credits. 0/1 absorbed fire star cores. 0/1 absorbed water star cores. 0/1 absorbed earth star cores. 0/1 absorbed wind star cores. 0/1 absorbed metal star cores. Ashlock looked down the long list of requirements and groaned in annoyance. But was then surprised when a list of rewards appeared alongside it. Rewards upon formation of the inner world. You will ascend to the nascent soul realm. The system will be upgraded with new features. Transpiration of Heaven and Chaos B will be upgraded. Stolen from Royal Road. This story should be reported if encountered on Amazon. Your attacks will carry the weight of your inner world behind them, and your rate of cultivation will increase the more you develop your inner world. Ashlock read over the messages for a while since it was a lot to take in. He had never seen such a high sacrificial credit cost for something, and because he was at the peak of the star core realm, it would become more challenging to gather the required credits. There was also the issue of him needing to find star core cultivators of the various basic elements to absorb. Though with the mystic realm and bounty hunters after Stella, absorbing the star cores of such common affinities shouldn't take long, Ashlock sighed. He was more worried about having to pour so many precious sacrificial credits into the creation of this inner world, but despite the high costs, the rewards were clear. The gap between a star core and nascent soul realm cultivator was uncrossable. If not for his curse eating Knox's soul alive, she would have chopped him down and then gone on to kill everyone in his sect. Possibly only being stopped by Maple or Larry if the spider had reached his next evolution. So, to achieve that realm would make him one of the undisputed strongest in the region and give him a fighting chance against the Blood Lotus Patriarch. But that wasn't all. Apparently, his system would be upgraded with new features, which definitely piqued Ashlock's interest. His system had been very laid back and offered few features thus far, so he wondered how it would be upgraded. Next, it claimed his cultivation technique would be upgraded, likely in some relation to his new inner world. If my cultivation technique is raised to the A or even S grade, I should be able to soar through the stages compared to others due to my S grade skill, Nocturnal Genesis, which can increase my cultivation speed tenfold during the night. Ashlock mused as he eyed the final reward, which spoke of increasing his cultivation speed even more the further developed his inner world was. However, what interested him more was how his attacks would carry the weight of his inner world. As that referring to the gravity of my presence? Will people feel the weight of a planet on their shoulders when they face me in the future? His mind was racing with many ideas, and he was excited about what this inner world could entail, but the real world demanded his attention for now. Dismissing the notifications and leaving his newly formed Chaos Nebula behind, he emerged from his body and glanced around with his demonic eye. The mountain peak was a mess. Crushed fruit painted the stone floor in a myriad of colors under a pile of broken branches. A crater that had served as Knox's grave lay nearby, and fallen leaves decorated the destruction as if it were late autumn. In the distance, he saw Dante being restrained to the ground by nothing but Larry's pressure. The Ashen King loomed over. Dante with the ring of ash that orbited his crown of horns, rotating rapidly. Since when was Larry that strong? Ashlock wondered. Has he reached the threshold to evolve to the S grade after this round in the mystic realm? Will he finally join Kata and become a divine summon? Dante could not even struggle as his star core was utterly devoid of chi. He had clearly fought until the end against everyone who had suddenly appeared from the mystic realm if the burns and wounds covering his body and surroundings were anything to go by. Sister, tell these savages to let me go. Dante ordered Elaine, who stood before him with her arms crossed below her chest. Savages. Elaine raised a brow. You're the one kneeling on the floor and barking like a dog. What exactly makes these people savages in your eyes? Dante glared at all the people present. He took a deep breath and looked back at Elaine with fake love in his eyes. Elaine. I am your dear brother. We share the same superior bloodline and family. I have always cared deeply and looked out for you. So how can you stand beside these people as your brother is reduced to such a state? I have never heard so much delusional bullshit in my life. And again with that bloodline nonsense. Elaine pinched the bridge of her nose as she let out a frustrated sigh. You and father never cared for me. I didn't live up to both of your twisted standards of perfection, so I was sent off to work under uncle. No, that's not true. Elaine cleared her voice and began imitating Dante. Sister, my time is precious. In fact, the mere seconds I spend gracing you with my words is a waste of time. Elaine smiled. That is what you told me last time we met in the Voidmind residence in Darklight City. Is it not? Does that sound like something a loving brother would say? That was merely in jest. You know I didn't mean it like that. Dante refuted with a frown. How could you be so cold to me now? Ever since the Skyrend Grand Elder crippled me, I have seen the error in my ways and become a changed man. You can see that, right? I regret what I said in the past, I really do. Elaine walked over and tapped Dante's head. Through his demonic eye, Ashlock saw that Elaine had infused an illusion into Dante's mind. She summoned a mirror before him and asked, What do you see? Dante's eyes widened. That's me, my perfect self. How did you do this? My hideous scars are gone. Elaine lowered the mirror. And me? What do you see? Dante studied her face. I see an inferior version of Mother. Yeah, you haven't changed one bit. Elaine snorted. Still the same terrible person you have always been. Wait. How did you do that? Dante was clawing at his face under Larry's pressure as he glared at the mirror on the floor. Change it back. It was all an illusion, Dante. Elaine smirked as she stepped away. Did you know our bloodline isn't cursed? There is a way for our family to ascend to the nascent soul realm, and I know how to do it. Dual core. Dante stared at Elaine as if she were a mythical creature. How could I have not thought of that? Did Uncle discover this? Is that how he ascended? Come with me back to the family right now to share this news. Our family can rise to new heights, and we will both be heralded as family heroes. I don't care about the family. Elaine looked away. Both you and father have been dead to me for a long time. I only care for mother and some of my siblings. Then you must let me live if you care about them. Dante shouted but then winced from his injuries. Don't listen to this blabbering idiot anymore. Elaine. Stella scowled as she drew her sword. His voice is grating my ears, and he's so darn ugly to look at. Let's just end this so we can move on and clean up this mess these two bastards caused. Now, hold on, Stella. Elaine pulled her back and whispered in her ear. I know you are distraught because Tree is hurt, but we might as well hear him out. It could be important. Okay. Stella glared at Dante before lowering her sword. Her arm was shaking, and she was covered in blood. Her bones were also likely broken from fighting with Knox, but Saul needed to be restored before the end could heal anyone. Thank you. Elaine sighed. Dante, I will humor you, but be quick. Why should I let you live? What does your life have to do with Mother? Dante was clearly displeased but hurried up when he saw Stella raise her sword again. Okay. I will tell you. A war is on the horizon between the Voidmind and the Skyrend family. A war that will start if I am not presented to the Skyrend Patriarch in a month. Okay. And? Elaine asked. Did you not hear me, you idiot? Dante hissed through his teeth. If I die, the war will start, and our family, including mother and our siblings, will be slaughtered. Knox consumed all of our spirit stones during her ascension, destroyed Sleemere City, and killed dozens of elders. Knox also cursed Father with the same curse that brought her here. I have to be kept alive for at least a month to prevent the war. Ashlock finally got the answer to why there had been a lightning storm over Sleemere. It had been Knox ascending to the nascent soul realm. Will my tribulation be that short and calm? Ashlock wondered. Knox's tribulation had destroyed the mortal city, but it had seemed weak compared to the tribulation Stella and the others had faced in the mystic realm to ascend to the star core realm. I don't see the problem here, Stella shrugged. We should just kill him. Elaine glanced over to Stella. What do you mean? If we turn him in, the war can be prevented. You only care about your mother and siblings, right? We can just go over and save them before the month ends and leave the rest of the family to die to the Skyrends. Stella grinned. Then we can join the battle and wipe out the Skyrends from behind. The more corpses, the happier Tree is. Ashlock was proud of his daughter's foresight. How could she have foreseen that he had a substantial sacrificial credit deficit to fill that a war would be perfect for? It was almost as if she read his mind. Are you insane? Dante asked Stella. You want to kill me and wipe out two of the most powerful noble families in the glorious Blood Lotus sect to feed corpses to a fucking tree? Elaine, are you listening to this? The people you stand beside are worshipping a tree. Stella crouched down before Dante and forced him to meet her eyes by gripping his jaw. Look around you. Everyone is gathered and alive here today because of that fucking tree. Under Ashlock's canopy and guidance, we have formed the Ashfallen sect that devours your beloved Blood Lotus sect from within, one person and noble family at a time. Your arrogance knows no bounds, Dante hissed. The Patriarch will find out about this. There is no way he will turn a blind eye to the start of such a war. This can all be prevented. Elaine, stop this madness, restrain this crazy bitch. Elaine ignored Dante and simply nodded to Stella. You call me insane and arrogant. Stella's eyes smiled as her hand blurred, and she stabbed Dante in the throat with a dagger, but that is what I call those fools who stand against us. Stella ruthlessly twisted and pulled out the dagger in a shower of blood. Dante began coughing up blood and wheezing for air, but Stella didn't care. She released her grip on Dante's chin and let him drop onto the ground as if it were a dirty sack of potatoes. Elaine, since it was your brother, what do you want to do with him? To call that person my brother? Elaine turned away as if disgusted to even look at it. I will leave that thing to you. Treat him with as much respect as he treated me in life. Stella nodded and turned on her heel to look toward Ashlock. Got any ideas, Tree? Do you want to eat him? Ashlock needed more credits, but he had an even better idea. Hey Maple, Ashlock spoke to the squirrel, napping in his branches, could you squash the body down and feed it into my eye? The last time this had happened, he had upgraded his Devour skill into Consuming Abyss with the Void Chi from the Voidmend Elder. Maple slowly woke up, and perhaps because he hadn't contributed thus far, the lazy squirrel actually conformed to his request without protest and trapped Dante's body into a bubble of void. Ashlock sent his void tendrils to wrap around the offered bubble of void containing Dante and began dragging him toward his demonic eye, peeking through his cracked and cut bark. Everyone who had emerged from the mystic realm watched as Dante gargled on blood and struggled within the void as he got closer to being swallowed by Ashlock. Once inside and released inside Ashlock's trunk, the Voidmend Scion gazed upon his blazing soul, engulfing a nebula with wide eyes. Blood flowed from his cut neck, and the life was slowly leaving his eyes. As expected, no star core cultivators were willing to die without a bang, so Dante started going supernova. Ashlock made no moves to stop the process and simply waited. As a demi-divine being, the void could not harm him. Instead, he would use the void chi to empower one of his skills. The mountain peak was still a mess. Everyone looked tired and hurt. But the Ashfallen sect still stood taller than ever. Ashlock was on the cusp of forming an inner world and reaching the next realm. Knox had been turned into a tree that lorded over Ashfallen City, which will see rapid development thanks to the thousands of new mudcloak that were joining the workforce. Everyone had seen a boost in cultivation due to the mystic realm, and Larry was likely about to ask to evolve to S rank. There was so much to catch up on and explore, but first, Ashlock would need to select which skill he wished to combine with the void element once Dante finished going supernova, and then I will need a long sleep to recover from all this. Ashlock sighed. Chapter 254. Ethereal Roots. Ashlock had never been a morning person. Even when he had been a human back on Earth, the morning sunlight filled him with more dread and sleepiness. Rather than waking up to the constant chirping of birds, he would roll over, bury his head deeper in his pillow, and pray for a few more minutes of rest. Ever since becoming a demonic tree, his slothful nature had only worsened. It was partially the fault of his personality that had followed him through death to this new world, but it was also due to his new biology. Time passed at a different rate to him, and even with the marvels of chi, he was still a giant tree with a body that spanned 1,000 miles in every direction and spread throughout the 8,000-meter-tall mountain he called home. Whatever the reasons and excuses, the point was he sucked at mornings, and the only thing worse than the mornings was a very eventful one that was sprung upon Ashlock before he could even bathe in the sunlight for a while. He had a headache, and it was not because of Dante Voidman blowing himself up supernova style inside his soul. Warning. Foreign chi detected. High risk of soul corruption. Ashlock looked at the messages he had seen before and, unlike last time, didn't feel a hint of panic. Soul corruption used to terrify him, but with his latest S-grade skill, Nocturnal Genesis, which slowly healed soul damage, such a risk didn't bother him. Generating solutions. Convert foreign chi into spatial chi. Merge void chi with a system skill to upgrade it. Dispel void chi into the nearby atmosphere. Just like last time, he was given a list of options. If only I was immune to all types of chi and not just void chi, Ashlock sighed as he picked the second option. Having someone go supernova inside my soul would undoubtedly kill me, but wouldn't it be cool if I could merge my skills with other affinities? The system messages drifted away, and his all too familiar status screen appeared. Demonic Demi-Divine Tree, Age 9. Star Core. 9th Stage. Soul Type. Amethyst, Spatial. Mutations. Demonic Eye, B. Blood Sap, C. Summons. Ashen King. Larry, A. Midnight Ink Lindworm. Kata, B. Skills. Skyborn Bastion, SSS. Necroflora Sovereign, SS. Mystic Realm, S. Locked until day. 3626. Progeny Dominion, S. Dimensional Overlap, S. Nocturnal Genesis, S. Eye of the Tree God, A. Abyssal Whispers, A. Deep Roots, A. Magic Mushroom Production, A. Lightning Chi Barrier, A. Chi Fruit Production, A. Consuming Abyss, B. Blooming Root Flower Production, B. Language of the World, B. Fire Chi Protection, B. Transpiration of Heaven and Chaos, B. Superior Poison Resistance, C. Compared to last time, I have so many more options to choose from, Ashlock lamented. It was too early in the morning to make such an important decision, and he was also pressed for time. Beyond his trunk were literally thousands of people and monsters that had emerged from the mystic realm awaiting his direction, and he also wanted to see how they had progressed. Select the skill you wish to merge with the void chi. As if sensing his wandering attention, the system reminded him to choose. The void chi could harm him if left unused and floating around his soul. Let's think this through. Assuming it works the same as last time, whatever skill I choose will go up a grade and be changed due to the addition of the void element. Devour, C, became Consuming Abyss, B, and without it, I would likely be dead by now. The void tendrils have been invaluable for disposing of stronger opponents that got past or defeated my allies. So, ideally, he would pick one of his attack skills to upgrade. I don't have any other attack skills other than Consuming Abyss. Ashlock scanned down the list. Other than Skyborn Bastion, SSS, or perhaps Dimension Overlap, S, which are sort of attack skills but not really. The more he thought about it, the more he realized these two would be interesting options. Skyborn Bastion, because it was an SSS grade skill, and he was curious if there was a grade higher than the SSS grade. Whereas if he upgraded Dimension Overlap, he might gain access to the void where Maple's siblings live. But these two skills already had a big issue. They were expensive. Sacrificial credits were getting harder to come by, and as Ashlock progressed, more skills relied on SC to function. Skyborn Bastion is one of my strongest skills right now, but the 1,000 credit cost is already far too steep. If I upgraded it now and the cost jumped up to create void bastions, I would never be able to afford it. Dimension Overlap is the same. Even if it unlocked a feature where I could go and visit Maple's siblings, I bet it won't be cheap. Ashlock didn't dismiss these skills, but he hunted for something better. I don't see how my production skills could benefit from the void element much. My protection and resistance skills would greatly help me, but they feel like a waste. If I need to use those skills in a fight, it means all else failed, and I am in great danger. So, I would rather pick a skill that lets me avoid that. This story has been taken without authorization. Report any sightings. Ashlock then noticed transpiration of heaven and chaos B. There isn't much point in upgrading my cultivation technique as I believe it was listed as one of the system rewards for reaching nascent soul realm, right? Rewards upon formation of the inner world. You will ascend to the nascent soul realm. The system will be upgraded with new features. Transpiration of heaven and chaos B will be upgraded. Your attacks will carry the weight of your inner world behind them, and your rate of cultivation will increase the more you develop your inner world. Oh yeah, there it is. Of course, there could be an argument for upgrading it to an A grade with void affinity and then upgrading again to an S once I reached nascent soul realm, but I want to pick something that will help me both now and in the future. Ashlock dismissed it. He had no idea how long it would take him to gather those 10,000 credits and different star cores to reach the next realm, and in that time, a better cultivation technique wouldn't help as it wouldn't advance him past the bottleneck. Progeny Dominion, Nocturnal Genesis, and Abyssal Whispers were also ticked off his list as he didn't want the void affinity affecting his connection to his offspring, warping the dreamscape before he figured out the purpose of those moons, or buffing his telepathy skill to the point it obliterated any mind he used it on. So what does that leave me with? Ashlock mulled over the list, and then a skill that he used every day in the background that was in desperate need of an upgrade caught his eye. Deep Roots A. Now that is an old skill. It constantly empowers my roots with chi, allowing them to burrow deeper and grow far faster than a normal tree. The distance I can cover that would take another 3 years, takes me a few days due to this A-grade skill. I can also hollow out my roots to turn them into tunnels, which Stella used to travel through the mountain before we both got better at using portals. It sounded like a simple skill, but its importance in his life should not be underestimated. Spreading his roots was integral to expanding his power and influence upon the realm. Anywhere within Ashlock's roots was his domain. He could flood areas with chi and open portals to transport people across vast distances. Connect with faraway forests and hunt monsters and people before they get closer. Not to mention, his bastions moved faster over land under his control. All of this happened because of his roots. His agency depended on the spreading of his roots. The further he reached, the more powerful and safer he was. In a way, his roots were his ultimate attack skill, as they enabled everything else. I can also see how void affinity would greatly empower my roots. Maybe I can burrow deep enough to latch onto that ley line that causes the beast tides to follow set paths. Ashlock mused. He had not forgotten about the ley lines. They were basically the chi arteries of the realm, and the area along them had higher concentrations of chi, which caused sects to be built upon them, but it also attracted the monsters. Choose system skill. Deep Roots A. Ashlock was a little hesitant. He was spoiled for choice, and there had been so many good options. No matter what he picked, there would be some regret, but overall, he felt this was the best choice for his current objectives. There could always be a next time if I get my hands on some of the Voidman family and force them to go supernova inside my soul. Mentally accepting the system prompt, he watched as the skill vanished from his list, and information began to flood his mind as something took its place. Skill upgrading. 1%. Skill upgrading. 27%. Skill upgrading. 53%. A short while passed, and as the information settled in his mind, he knew he had made a good choice. Skill upgrading. 100%. Void Chi corruption eradicated. Skill upgrade successful. Upgraded Deep Roots A to Ethereal Roots S. A wave of power surged through the entire mountain and across the land as his roots slowly changed from simple fleshy roots coated in a layer of chi to something more. It wasn't until now that Ashlock realized how weighed down he had been. Much like burying his foot in wet sand at the beach when he had been human, Ashlock's roots had tons of rock and earth pressing down and restricting their movement. He just hadn't noticed since it had been like that since his rebirth as a tree. Until now, he had spent a lot of chi and nutrients trying to force his roots through the rock, which grew more challenging and costly the further from his trunk he ventured. But now he felt reborn as his roots began to take on an ethereal nature, much like the ones that phased through reality to connect him to his bastion, and he was freed from the pressure. God, that feels so good, Ashlock relished in the relief washing through his vast body. It was impossible to describe, but it was as if the weight of the world unknowingly suffocating him had been lifted. Ashlock closely inspected his nearest root right below his trunk, as it had been the first to complete the transformation. It looked similar to before but was ever so slightly transparent. He could see his cursed sap flowing through it in the hollowed-out center, which had served as a tunnel before. Before, My roots could only burrow deeper. I couldn't move them around freely due to the rock restricting them, but if the information regarding the skill is correct, then. Ashlock tried to raise his root upwards, and to his astonishment, it worked. As the root rose to the surface, the rock above vanished as if eaten by the void. Ashlock felt chi being drained from his star core, but to his relief, no sacrificial credits were spent. So, at the cost of chi, I can move my roots around freely as if they were tentacles underwater. Well, it is more like viscous mud. There is still some resistance, but it's way less than before. Am I like a rock octopus now? No. More like an octotree. Ashlock wiggled around for a bit and wanted to experiment more, but at the rate of change, it would take a few days for all of his roots to transition to their new ethereal form. Which was a shame since he was looking forward to the other effects of the skill. Turning his roots from fleshy sap to ones that were more ethereal in nature came with many advantages. Worrying about the distance from his trunk was a thing of the past. Because his roots were now ethereal, the transfer of chi down them offered no resistance, so he lost no chi to the surroundings during the transfer. Which was a massive boon to everything he did. He could exchange chi and nutrients with his offspring with the same efficiency no matter how far they were from him, and he could fight distant battles without wasting as much chi. The fact I don't leak chi into the surroundings as much also helps me spread my roots closer to my enemies without them noticing, perhaps even under their very feet, Ashlock concluded, because one of the most significant advantages of the void element that had turned his roots ethereal was its ability to remain undetected. It's what made Chaos an apex predator that could appear beside and rip apart cultivators before they even knew how they died. Other aspects of the void also carried over to his new roots, such as their capabilities to go through anything. Defensive arrays. Runically enhanced. Walls. Dimensions. The void itself. There was nothing to block or stop his roots from spreading. Space also seems compressed in my roots, considering how fast my cursed sap appears to flow, Ashlock muttered as he examined his own root a little closer. Deciding to quickly test it for curiosity's sake, he had the hollowed-out root rise out of the ground beside him and then, under everyone's curious gazes, used telekinesis to drop fruit into it. The fruit blinked in and out of existence, traveling through the root as if the distance was near zero and arriving at the tunnel exit down in the cavern a second later. 8,000 meters had been crossed in an instant. The fruit didn't gain any velocity, so rather than splatting hard on the ground, it simply plopped onto the stone. I am glad I tested that beforehand with a fruit. It would have been a disaster if Stella or someone went through and got slammed into the ground as if they had been shot via a railgun. Ashlock already had many ideas for this aspect of his new ethereal roots, as it seemed safe for even mortals and weak cultivators to use it. Basically, it's like a portal, but I don't have to manually keep opening and closing it. The possibilities really are endless. I could use this to connect Red Vine Peak to Ashfallen City, create a way for the Redclaws to venture deep into the wilderness in seconds, or use it for our pill empire, which is still in the process of selling a single pill, but let's ignore that small detail. Ashlock had felt some spatial chi being spent to send that fruit down, so his roots were definitely using his spatial chi to shorten the distance. Oh shit. If I spend my chi, will the system take away my ability to reach nascent soul realm? Ashlock dug through his system screens and pulled up the notification. Requirements to turn Chaos Nebula into an inner world. 2,565 10,000th sacrificial credits. 0/1 absorbed fire star cores. 0/1 absorbed water star cores. 0/1 absorbed earth star cores. 0/1 absorbed wind star cores. 0/1 absorbed metal star cores. He couldn't see anywhere that mentioned or suggested that he couldn't spend as much chi as he wanted, which was a relief. As usual, the system only really cared for the precious sacrificial credits and left him and his cultivation alone. Master, please excuse my interruption. Ashlock was pulled out of his consciousness by a gruff voice he recognized immediately. Since his demonic eye was still open, he gazed down at Larry standing before him. In the red hue that showed Ashlock the flow of chi, Larry looked like a blazing sun of power on par with Knox, who had died moments earlier and been turned into a tree and planted in Ashfallen City. Larry, my loyal summon. How can I help? Ashlock asked, but he suspected the answer. I was hoping the Honorable Master would bless my evolution. Larry has accumulated enough chi to evolve to S grade. New evolution options have been added due to consumption of divine flesh. Ashen King, Larry, wishes to evolve. Yes, no. Was that even a question? Yes, of course, I approve of your evolution, Ashlock replied to Larry, and the system also seemed to hear his words as the words faded and new ones took their place. The divine evolution options for the Ashen King filled his mind. Chapter 255. Divine Ash. Ashlock looked down the short list of options, and as with Kata's evolution, there was a very obvious one at the top that glowed with a sense of grandeur and divinity. But he skipped it to check out the others to satisfy his curiosity, as this was the first ever S-grade evolution that would put Larry firmly into the nascent soul realm power level. So what would the system have offered Larry if he hadn't eaten the eggs of a midnight inkwing? Ashen. Emperor. Larry's royal bloodline progresses, and his control over ash becomes absolute. He can now create constructs or creatures from ash, and his tactical prowess is heightened. Larry's horns will turn silver, signifying his royal status, and the halo of ash orbiting his crown of horns becomes more pronounced and controlled. His mere presence will be enough to inspire awe in allies and crush enemies. So the first option would have been a natural upgrade to the Ashen King evolution path he was already going down. Ashlock pondered, this evolution appears to turn Larry into a summoner-style control mage. Which makes sense for an emperor. He would go into battle by crushing his enemies under his royal presence and then unleash an army of creations made from ash to kill them. It was a good option, and he was curious about what else the system would offer. Ashen Stormbringer. Larry becomes the wielder of mass destruction. Gaining immense insight into many DAOs, this evolution allows Larry to summon not just ash storms, but also thunderstorms, blizzards, and windstorms. His fur becomes stormy gray, swirling with mini storms, and his horns crackle with lightning. If the Ashen Emperor was a control mage class, this is more of a destruction mage. Ashlock thought back to how the Winterwrath Grand Elder had attacked the Ravenborns while riding a titan of ice flanked by a blizzard that engulfed the valley. Large-scale storms sure are destructive, to mortals and weaklings. But to stronger opponents, they are nothing but a hindrance to their spiritual sense and chi regeneration rather than a life-threatening attack. There was a reason so many of his sect members were better at single-target fighting. It was the best way to win in this world. Battles weren't won by defeating an army but rather by taking out the strongest member of the opposition. This is where people like Chaos, Diana, and Stella came in, as they could reach and kill anyone they needed through movement techniques. It also mentioned that Larry would command these storms due to heightened DAO understanding rather than gaining more affinities. So Larry could only summon a blizzard in an area of dense ice chi, for example. I would prefer that Larry had the capabilities to fight someone in the nascent soul realm by himself rather than be a support-style mage by summoning storms because until I reach nascent soul myself, Larry will be the strongest sect member beside Maple. Venomous Overlord. Specializing in toxins, this evolution grants Larry the ability to produce and control various deadly venoms that he can merge with his ash. His fur takes on a sickly green hue, and his horns drip with a potent poison. Ashlock read over the description of the last offered evolution, and rather than thinking about its fighting capabilities since it could be countered by simple poison resistance pills, he focused on a different angle. Wouldn't this evolution be perfect for the poison pills that Stella was working on? Even if it were useful, Ashlock definitely wouldn't pick this option as he could already imagine how sad Larry would be to learn his S-grade evolution had reduced him to a poison-making lab rat. The spider would do it if ordered, but Ashlock knew Larry preferred to serve the protector and hunter role for him. It seems the S-grade evolutions for Larry were less about changing his body or form to something like an arachne and more focusing his fighting style. Ashlock concluded, out of these three, I would have chosen to progress Larry's royal bloodline and control over Ash with the Ashen Emperor evolution path, but I think it's obvious which one I will be picking. Ashlock looked back at the top of the list to the option that had been so hard to overlook and not peek at while he went over the other options. Herald of the Divine Ash. Larry. Plus, having eaten the flesh of a divine being from an upper realm, Larry has unlocked a new path to power. As a Herald of the Divine Ash, he will begin his path to become a deity. Alongside unlimited cultivation potential, Larry will gain divine authority over ash and decay. He will be able to decay any matter at will within his realm of influence. Also, as a divine being with governance over an affinity, Larry's body will be reformed entirely from divine ash, allowing him to reincarnate from ash and gain immortality. His body will be reformed from divine ash. Ashlock felt that was familiar and was starting to see a pattern. When Kata had his divine evolution, his body turned from flesh and blood to one made entirely from divine ink. Are all divine beings made from their affinity, or is this something unique to my summons? No. Wait, the Midnight Inkwing had been entirely made from ink, too, so maybe it is common for divine beings to be made from their affinity. That aside, there was a lot of information hidden within the text describing the evolution. Since this evolution puts Larry on the path to godhood, Will he become a deity at the SSS grade, or will he need to go higher than that to achieve true godhood? Ashlock wondered but knew the only way to get a hint of the answer would have been upgrading his Skyborn Bastion SSS skill, which he hadn't done. Divine authority over Ash and Decay is interesting. Ash is easy enough to imagine as Larry already uses it, and having divine authority should mean that Larry won't need to consult heaven as much to use techniques and can simply do things with Ash. But decay is a state of matter rather than an affinity, right? How can he have divine authority over a state of matter? Can he simply command something to disintegrate into ash before him? That certainly sounded like something a deity would be capable of, and that wasn't all. Apparently, as a herald of the divine ash, Larry could also reincarnate from the ash, technically making him immortal. I suppose that's the same for Kata as well. Since they both have bodies made from the condensing or their affinities rather than one of flesh and blood, so long as there is enough of their affinity nearby, they can endlessly reform. Ashlock contemplated. So, with all the information I was given, would Larry's fighting style with this evolution be an immortal drain tank? So long as he fights an opponent within a storm of divine ash, he can keep reforming his body even if destroyed, and he would deplete the opponent's chi pool until they cannot resist the decay and disintegrate into a pile of ash. It was terrifying, and as expected, the divine option was far better than the basic ones provided by the system. System, I choose the Herald of the Divine Ash. Stolen from its rightful author, this tale is not meant to be on Amazon. Report any sightings. Evolution path, Herald of the Divine Ash chosen, evolution initiating. Thank you, Master, Larry said gruffly as a tear in reality opened above him. Silver flakes of ash poured down like divine glitter and began to swirl around Larry, forming a cocoon. Even as the tear in reality vanished, there was still a divine presence weighing down on the mountain from Larry's cocoon. Ashlock used telekinesis to float the divine ash cocoon up into his branches and nestled it close to his trunk, where he could protect and watch over him while he evolved. With his new void skill picked and Larry's evolution out of the way, Ashlock could finally focus on his sect members who had left the mystic realm. Glancing over them with his demonic eye, he would be able to quickly assess their progress by the amount of chi stored within their souls. But first, he gazed up at the behemoth of twisted dark red wood that loomed over the entire mountain peak, casting a shadow. It was the Titan tortoise that Ashlock had turned into an Enten named Jeb. It felt like he was looking up at the canopy of a four-poster bed, with the underside of the Ent creating a ceiling overhead with its four legs taller than even him. Jeb wasn't quite mountain-sized, but he was darn close to the size of a smaller one. Perhaps a large hill was a better descriptor, just with legs, a maw that could swallow a bastion whole, and a small forest of red bark trees adorned with golden-brown leaves that matched the color of its fifth-stage star core soul fire. Ashlock needed Jeb to move for a very tree-specific reason. The darn thing was so big it shrouded him and his offspring from the glorious morning sunlight. Jeb, can you move to the south side of the mountain range? There should be a space near there that you can settle down, and you won't look too out of place, Ashlock told the Titan tortoise. You're blocking my precious sunlight. The behemoth let out a low roar that shook the whole peak before it turned its enormous body and descended the mountain. Since its legs weren't solid and were more a collection of twisted red roots, it could step around Ashlock's offspring without flattening them as it moved, which he appreciated. As Jeb left, Ashlock got a clear view of its turtle shell-like back. Nestled among the golden-brown leaved trees were many huts built from stone, and he saw thousands of mudcloaks scurrying around and looking back at Red Vine Peak with their glowing blue eyes. Wait. There were more of them. Ashlock looked before him. Gathered around the hole to the citadel, there were orders of magnitude more mudcloaks than before. He had been worried that they wouldn't all be able to fit in the citadel, which was a hole spanning 100 meters wide and 8,000 meters down. But there were even more living on Jeb's back. Douglas, Ashlock said through abyssal whispers, just how many mudcloaks did you manage to save in a single month? The man wearing a beige suit and casually leaning on his walking stick met the gaze of his demonic eye, and judging from the earth chi flowing through his body, he had broken through to the 9th stage of the Soulfire realm. It made sense he hadn't managed to leap into the Star Core realm as he had been too busy commanding a war. Many are still left, but I believe we saved at least half of them. Douglas said respectfully as he stepped forward. With the help of Jeb, we saved 6 large settlements of mudcloaks and wiped out 8 kobold strongholds. That was impressive progress. Perhaps all of the mudcloaks would be saved within the next Mystic Realm visit, but then he would need to think about where to put them all. Douglas glanced to the side at the departing back of Jeb. Immortal, would it be possible to make a portal or tunnel between the citadel and Jeb so the mudcloaks aren't separated? During our war, Many mudcloaks made Jebs back their new homes, and I don't believe they will all fit inside the citadel. I can handle that, so don't worry, Ashlock replied. He would have one of his hollowed-out, ethereal roots connect Jeb with the citadel so the mudcloaks could move between the two places. Could you show the rest of the mudcloaks the citadel and have them settle in? They are crowding the peak. Douglas chuckled as he glanced around at the thousands of mudcloaks, staring at the sky or the ground to avoid Ashlock's demonic gaze. Okay, everyone, follow me to your new home. Don't get too comfortable, though, as I am sure the immortal will have some very reasonable work for us soon, like building an entire city in a single night. I deserve that, Ashlock sighed, ignoring Douglas's smirk as he led the mudcloaks into the citadel's depths. It took a while for all the little monsters to vacate the peak, but once they did, Ashlock could let out another sigh of relief. He didn't usually get claustrophobic, but having the entire peak being a sea of little monsters had unnerved him. With that out of the way, he swept his gaze over the remaining sect members. Since he wanted to have a more private chat with the core group, he focused on the Redclaws, who happened to be standing next to one another. Excuse my gaze. I am just checking everyone's progress, Ashlock told them through abyssal whispers. Most of them had to gobble down Mind Fortress pills upon him, forcing his presence into their minds. From the looks of things, everyone had experienced a single stage of growth. This was solid progress for some, but it showed signs of a lack of talent or focus in others. The Redclaw Grand Elder had gone from the 6th to the 7th stage in the Starcore realm, meaning he was getting closer to the bottleneck of the nascent soul realm that Ashlock was now stuck at. Meanwhile, Elder Margaret and Elder Mo had both gone from the 1st to the 2nd stage of the Starcore realm. Good growth, but not very impressive considering what the more talented younger generation can do. Ashlock thought. He knew this world had a different view of the world. Talent, as they deemed people with poor spirit roots or drowning in heart demons as talentless, which he could cure with his truffles. In his eyes, talent was something else. He had started to notice that just like studying in school or practicing martial arts, some people simply don't like or have a talent for cultivation. Even if given a path to a longer and safer life, not everyone was willing to sit in a dark cave for sometimes years to contemplate heaven's whispers. Elder Brent was a good example. He willingly remained behind to supervise a new city of mortals rather than delve into the mystic realm and try to reach the Starcore realm. Something about being blasted by heavenly lightning that has the chance to obliterate his soul must not have appealed to him. Ashlock chuckled as he finished his inspection of the Redclaw elders, and then his gaze landed on a young woman with the same crimson-red hair as the rest of her family and a bright smile. Amber was the most talented of the Redclaw's younger generation, and it looked like she would hold on to that title. Humming within her chest was a freshly formed star core, and Ashlock started to suspect the reason why all the elders hadn't made as much progress as he had hoped. Amber, you reached the star core realm. At such a young age as well, I am impressed. Ashlock praised her and enjoyed how excited she looked despite trembling a little under his demonic gaze. Her elders also wore proud expressions. They must have worked hard in the mystic realm to help her ascend. You should return to your peak and celebrate your ascension with the others. And to the elders, you have all made good and steady progress. The Grand Elder stepped forward and bowed. It is only due to the immortal's generosity and guidance that we have come this far. For decades, maybe even centuries, I have been the only star core cultivator holding our family together. Yet in a few short months, not only have a few of my fellow elders joined me in this realm of power, but so has a member of the younger generation. Such progress is unheard of and, if continued, would put us on par with the other major families of the Blood Lotus sect. Then my investment and trust in you will not have been wasted, Ashlock responded as he saw resolve in the Grand Elder's eyes. With a war brewing nearby, the beast tide on the horizon, I will need all the firepower we can muster. All the elders and Amber followed their Grand Elder's lead, paid their respects with a bow, and said in unison, we will do our best to serve and repay the immortal. Did they have that speech practiced? Ashlock thought with some amusement. The more he interacted with the Reclaws, the more he liked them. Next mystic realm, I should give them all the skin improvement truffles and have some more of the younger generation join. The Grand Elder clearing his throat drew Ashlock's attention. If that is all, we will be on our way. Yes, that is all. Check on Elder Brent when you return. I hear he has been having some headaches due to the mortals of Ashfallen City. The Grand Elder nodded while taking to the skies on his flying sword. Elder Margaret, Elder Mo, and even Amber, with less grace than her elders, followed closely behind, drawing streaks of crimson flame through the air. With them gone, Ashlock looked down at the bench below his demonic eye where the others had gathered. Elaine sat on the bench, tending to Stella's wounds while Diana played with Kata nearby. It didn't take more than a glance with his demonic eye to notice how shockingly far all his inner circle members had progressed. Especially Diana and Kata. There was also something hard to miss. Was Kata always that big? Ashlock wondered as the ink lindworm towered over Diana and licked her forehead. Chapter 256. Duel. Ashlock inspected Kata and discovered the reason for his explosive growth in size. My summons and monsters generally don't follow the same cultivation system as humans, but if I had to guess, Kata has gone up around 3 stages in the Star Core realm, Ashlock muttered with a hint of surprise. Just how much ink chi had this greedy snake absorbed? If he experiences this much growth in the next Mystic Realm visit, he might be closing in on his evolution to a grade. Since Kata's entire body was made from heavenly ink, the more he absorbed, the more he would grow. Kata, you are too big now to act like this, Diana protested as Kata wrapped his body around her. The poor woman looked like she would drown in ink as she gasped for air. The lindworm, now easily 30 meters long, frowned at his favorite human's words. Through his demonic eye, Ashlock saw how the heavenly ink chi that made up Kata's body began to condense, and his body started to shrink. It continued until he reduced his length from 30 meters to only 3. Diana gasped in relief as she stopped being coiled around and looked down at Kata, who was now wrapped around her feet and clearly asking to be picked up like old times with his big golden eyes. Okay. Fine, come here. Diana tried to pick Kata up but struggled. He may have reduced his size, but was now far more dense. Kata let out a sad hiss as Diana failed to lift him. She put some chi into her arms, and the stone below her feet cracked as she picked up the lindworm with a grunt. There. Are you happy now? Kata licked her face, leaving an ink stain across her cheek as if someone had taken a paintbrush and slapped her with it. Can you stop licking me? Diana grumbled as demonic mist carried the ink stain away. Ashlock noticed her muscles were tensed, and if she didn't keep cycling her chi through her body, lifting Kata would be impossible. Even with her partial demonic form due to her bloodline, which gives her immense strength, she still struggles to pick up Kata. Though if she was to fully transform, I am sure lifting him would be a piece of cake. How did you even get so big in such a short amount of time? Diana asked Kata a question Ashlock was also curious about, but Kata simply smirked and refused to answer. Stella laughed from the bench. He's a glutton just like Tree. I bet he found more of those eggs to eat or swam around an ink sea for a month. Kata hissed in annoyance from Diana's arms. What? Am I wrong? Don't act so mysterious. It's not like you did something heroic or insane, such as robbing the Azure clan or fighting a fire titan. Or did you? Stella stopped speaking and winced from the pain. Ow ow ow. Stop squirming around and give the healing pills a minute to fuse your spine back in place. Elaine gently pushed Stella back on the bench. The fact you are still in one piece is baffling. I'm fine, really. Stella waved her off. I still have soul's healing light running through my body. Just give me a minute, and I will be as good as new. Stella did, in fact, not look fine at all. Her white clothes were soaked with blood and were shredded in places. It was as if she had crawled out from a war zone. But through his demonic eye, he could verify that Stella wasn't lying. Even with soul's healing light and the pills working in harmony, the rate at which her bones and organs were healing was horrifying. Cultivators really were a league above humans, as what Stella was treating as nothing to be concerned about would have killed a mortal person 100 times over. Sorry, Stella, I got distracted by other pointless things. I should have repaired Saul first and had him heal you again, Ashlock said through abyssal whispers. Oh, Tree, I thought I felt your gaze on my back but wasn't sure. Stella looked over her shoulder and stared into his demonic eye with a smile. This really is nothing. I am just glad you are okay. You are fine, right? Nothing a long sleep can't fix, Ashlock reassured her. His system had offered to repair him for thousands of credits, but he had no interest in that. A few long sleeps under the 9 moons and he would be as good as new. Thank the heavens. I got worried when you suddenly went silent after eating Dante. Stella sighed. Even with the curse weakening her, Knox was stronger than I thought a fresh nascent soul realm would be. Her presence was enough to flatten me to the floor, and every hit she landed obliterated my defenses as if they were mere parchment, and I felt her attacks down to my bones. Next time will be different, Ashlock said. I am on the cusp of ascending to nascent soul realm, and you have all grown considerably since I last saw you. Stella, to block Knox's attacks and survive, you must have had a very productive session in the mystic realm. I went from the 4th to the 6th stage of the Star Core realm, Stella said proudly. It was hard, but due to your fruits and the chi gathering array, I managed to make such progress. Very impressive, Ashlock agreed. You are a step behind the Redclaw Grand Elder while being only 16. That is great progress, Stella. You should be proud, Diana agreed, to be on the way to nascent soul realm while so young. At your age, I was stuck in the soul fire realm yet was hailed as a prodigy until the heart demons formed. Thank you, Stella beamed. How about you, Diana? How was your progress? Diana grinned, showing her fangs. I went from the 1st to the 4th stage of the Star Core realm. This tale has been unlawfully obtained from Royal Road. If you discover it on Amazon, kindly report it. Stella's smile faltered. What? Don't get jealous now. Diana gave Stella a knowing look. Keep things in perspective. I am 5 years older than you. It's easier to progress through lower stages, and I found a realm specifically designed to help people of my bloodline progress in their cultivation. Not to mention the usual downside of my affinity, which is a risk of heart demons, is nullified by the truffles so generously grown by Ashlock. As Diana spoke, Ashlock saw Stella's gaze slowly grow more tranquil. Yes, that is all reasonable, but progressing 3 stages in a single month is not, Stella grumbled. Elaine, what about you? How much have you grown? Under Stella's tranquil gaze, Elaine shuffled to the edge of the bench. Nothing as impressive as you two. Ashlock would have to disagree. If what he saw through his demonic eye was to believe, she had grown in leaps and bounds. Stella squinted at her. I killed your brother for you because you didn't want to do it. The least you could tell me is this, right? I suppose so. Elaine pushed her glasses up and smiled awkwardly. I went up 3 stages in the soul fire realm, so I am at the 9th stage now. So you also grew more than me. Stella looked at her feet and muttered. Her shoulders sagged, and she looked like she had just received terrible exam results. I am the one who should be feeling bad, Elaine protested. I am a decade older than you and still stuck in the soul fire realm and lacking the thing that matters most, combat experience. If anything, I am playing catch up even more than Diana. Stella's eyes widened, and she glanced up at Diana. Combat experience. I don't like how you are looking at me with that overly calm gaze. Diana shuddered. Just spit it out. Stella stood up and drew her sword from her spatial ring. It's been a while since we had a duel. Do you remember when you first arrived here, and we would spar day and night? Yes, I remember you wouldn't stop demanding combat practice until you consistently started beating me, and then you weren't interested anymore. Well, so much has changed since then. Stella grinned, which was unnerving when paired with her bloodied clothes and calm gaze. We have both awakened bloodlines and progressed into the Star Core realm. Wouldn't now be a good time to see the difference in power between us? Aren't you injured? Diana raised a brow. Stella cracked her neck and rolled her shoulders, in good enough condition to beat you. Arrogant as always, Diana clicked her tongue. Fine. If it will sat your envy, then I don't see why not. We can duel. Is this really a good idea? Ashlock asked. Back then, the most you two could do was cause some damage to buildings, but now you could kill one another in a single well-placed attack. I survived being stamped on by Lucius while he was empowered, did I not? And Stella was smacked around by Knox and is now pointing a sword at me minutes later, Diana said to his canopy. So long as neither of us aims for the head, it should be fine. We have Saul to heal us. No, you don't. Ashlock reminded them. Dante struck Saul with a void attack, so he will take a while to repair. Ashlock had no interest in spending many of the hard-earned sacrificial credits he needed for his ascension on repairing Saul just so Stella and Diana could compare their egos. Cultivators really were unruly sometimes. Well, if I die, have Kata revive me with some long-forgotten revival technique, Diana chuckled, setting Kata down with a grunt. She then gestured with her chin for Stella to follow her over to the central area of the mountain peak, where they would have space to duel. While they took up their positions 100 meters apart, Ashlock had to wonder when Diana had changed. She used to be the more cautious member of the group but was now more arrogant and up for fighting. She became more emotional and impulsive ever since awakening her bloodline and transitioning into a demoness, Ashlock muttered. Is this the fabled demon's pride? Are those two really best friends? Elaine asked as she sat alone on the bench with Maple on her lap and Kata having returned to his full-size coiled nearby. Ashlock chuckled. Yes, though I suppose they act more like competitive sisters. Stella has a bit of a habit of getting jealous and paranoid when others progress faster than her. I see. That makes sense. Elaine nodded. Who do you think will win? That was a good question. Hard to say. It all depends on how serious Stella is about winning, and if her tranquil gaze is anything to go by, she is taking this duel seriously, so Diana may be in trouble if she isn't careful. But Stella is also injured, and Diana did experience some explosive growth in the mystic realm, so it's hard to say. Her gaze did seem odd. It was almost inhumanly calm. Is that related to her bloodline? Elaine asked. Yes, though her bloodline is far more mysterious than Diana's. We are still learning more about it every day. Ashlock said and realized something. Why had her bloodline activated during a duel with Diana? From the top of my head, her bloodline activated during the alchemy tournament, fighting Knox near me and the bounty hunters on the bastion. Ashlock mused, but it didn't activate when she tried to chase down Knox or trespass the Azure clan library. I was starting to think it activated when she felt threatened or if my life was in danger, but why wouldn't it activate when being stared down by an elder from an upper realm? Ashlock looked at Stella. She stood with her sword tip pointed at Diana on the other side of the mountain peak with an utterly calm expression as the wind messed with her hair. Time to see who of us is the strongest, Stella said without a hint of emotion. Purple soul fire erupted around her body and down her sword, making the air ripple and warp as if bending to her will. Ashlock felt this situation further cemented his hypothesis that Stella's bloodline was that of a ruler. Perhaps Diana hadn't been far off. Stella really is the sin of pride and envy, for better or worse. If she feels her authority or pride is at risk, her bloodline will activate to help bridge the gap. It was still a hypothesis, but it seemed to fit when compared to all previous examples of her bloodline activating. Ashlock had noticed how Stella's pride turned to envy when Diana mentioned how much she had grown in the mystic realm despite all the good reasons for their differing growth. Ashlock had thought that Stella was simply too immature and seeking praise to understand that just because Diana and Elaine grew by 3 stages did not diminish the fact she was one of the strongest in the whole sect at only 16. But perhaps it was less about her personality and something ingrained into her, just like how Diana would enter a berserk state when fully unleashing her demon form. Stella, I hope you don't make any excuses when you lose, Diana said as she began her transformation. Majestic wings of feathered darkness thrice her size sprouted from her shoulders, her fangs grew, and her nails elongated into claws. Finally, her eyes transitioned from gray to black. She opened her mouth and breathed out a cloud of mist that began to surround and conceal her form. Shadows manifested and started moving around the mist, letting out wails of misery that echoed across the mountain peak. If not for his demonic gaze, Ashlock would be unable to tell Diana apart from the shadows inhabiting the mist. The difference between this mist made from her new affinity and the one made from water chi in the past was like night and day. Due to the addition of the demonic chi, this haunted mist was far harder to penetrate with spiritual sight and seemed to empower Diana. Now I am not so sure who will win. Ashlock mused as he watched Stella fearlessly walk toward the encroaching mist. I suppose whoever strikes first will be the winner. The question is, does Stella have an answer to Diana's mist? As it turned out, she had more than just an answer. Chapter 257. I am a monster. Diana crept through the dense demonic mist, flexing her wings and fingers in anticipation. Having taken on her demonic form and surrendered to her bloodline, she had a primal urge to charge at Stella, who stood on the other side of the mountain peak with an annoyingly unfazed look despite the encroaching demonic mist. But then she would lose without a doubt. Stella, despite her flaws and young age, was talented. It was like she had been born for combat and fought life and death battles since childhood. If that wasn't bad enough, Diana had seen her fighting once her bloodline was active. It turned her from a talented but lacking experienced fighter to a ruthless being devoid of openings and weakness. It was as if she had a third eye in the back of her head and could foresee the future. Be patient, Diana hissed to herself as she kept her eyes and spiritual sense peeled for the first sign of movement from Stella. Even the slightest twitch or ripple in spatial chi would not escape her notice. As a spatial cultivator, distance was a non-factor for Stella in this fight. If not for the demonic mist concealing her location, she could appear behind Diana in the blink of an eye. Diana watched from the shadows of the mist as Stella took in a deep breath and tilted her sword horizontally. Purple soul fire flowed down the blade's edge, making the air shudder. It looked like she was preparing to attack but was looking at the wrong part of the mist. What is she doing? Diana wondered. I have never seen her open an attack like that. Is this a new technique she learned during the mystic realm? How did she manage that and increase her cultivation by 2 stages? Diana believed she had a very fortuitous encounter in the mystic realm. She had stumbled upon another training ground of the Ravina clan floating among the thousands of pocket dimensions. The demonic mist there was dense and of peak star core quality. A large chi gathering formation had been constructed on the island, and she could cultivate it without worries. She had even retrieved some flowers she planned to give to Ashlock later. Yet somehow Stella had still inched ahead. Unaware of Diana's bafflement, Stella closed her eyes and crouched with her sword outstretched horizontally. She then rapidly spun around on her heel as her soul fire shot down her blade. Her sword cleaved through reality, sending tears that streaked to the other side across the mountain peak. She didn't stop there and kept spinning and cutting reality as she slowly stood up to her full height. Diana saw it all in slow motion due to her heightened demon senses as the attacks approached. If Stella had unleashed a single dimension / horizontally or vertically, Diana could have simply avoided it and had her mystery fill the gap. However, since Stella sent multiple horizontal waves of dimension tears her way, there was nowhere to run or hide. So, you want to force me out? Clever girl. Let's take this fight to the air. Diana pushed chi into her artifact boots that they had looted from the dead bounty hunters. They took on a ghostly form in reaction to her chi, and she felt her body lurched up in a blur as she leapt into the sky and spread out her wings. From above, she watched in real time as the dimension tears tore through her mist, and anything that was left lingering was sucked to the other side as the rips in reality snapped closed with a thunderclap and rush of air. Stella finished her attack by calmly opening her eyes and looking straight up at Diana as if she had known her exact location all along. It must be some kind of spatial perception. Diana mused. Knowledge of spatial cultivators wasn't as widespread as other affinity types, but she had still endured lectures from tutors when she was young and spent a lot of time watching Stella fight, so she knew the basics. The first lesson had been that distance when facing a spatial cultivator is meaningless, and the second lesson was always to watch your back. Stella vanished as if she had been an illusion. Diana relied on her heightened perception and reaction time to spin around and grab Stella's blade with her claws in a shower of sparks and ringing steel. Surprised, Diana smirked as Stella's eyes widened ever so slightly. You know I don't only have ridiculous strength as a demon, right? With Stella's sword locked in place, Diana used her other arm to push down on Stella's shoulder with all the force she could muster, sending the girl plummeting to the ground and impacting the stone with a loud crash followed by hairline cracks spreading out from the impact site. Flapping her wings to gain height as she had the advantage in the air, Diana looked down with a fang-filled grin. In that short exchange, she had confirmed a drastic difference in strength and speed from before entering the mystic realm. Diana felt Ashlock's eye shift its focus to her, and she shuddered. Hey, you know she asked for it, right? This duel was her idea, and she almost cut me in half if I didn't jump up in time. Diana muttered and rolled her eyes. It's not my fault she's arrogant and needed a lesson. Stop being so protective. She is fine. Diana knew that the tree cared for her and enjoyed her company, but it was clear who his favorite was. Ashlock was far too protective of Stella, and there was definitely a hint of disapproval in the tree's gaze at her actions of hurling his adopted daughter into the ground. The dust from the thrown-up rock blew away in the fierce mountain winds, and as Diana suspected, Stella arose from the destruction and was totally fine. A simple throw like that wouldn't even leave a scratch on a star core cultivator. If I had been going for the kill, I would have infused my claws with my demonic mist rather than using raw strength. And instead of throwing Stella to the ground, I would have snapped her neck or torn her arm off. You know, Diana, this is why I love to practice with you, Stella said as she stood there looking up, still wreathed in spatial flames. Her gaze was tranquil, but a light smile tugged at the edge of her lips. Oh, Diana raised a brow. And why is that? Every time we fight, I learn something new. Stella rolled her shoulders, likely to rid herself of the stiffness from being hurled into solid stone. I just realized that I have come to rely on my bloodline too much. From my understanding of it so far, it gives me heightened reaction times and helps me focus on the flow of battle. Perfect for sword fights where I can react and copy an opponent's fighting style, not so much when the opponent can just grab my sword and lock me in place. Diana smiled and was glad Stella was still as focused on self-improvement as before. So, how do you plan to beat me then? Diana asked. Well, with your demonic mist gone, Stella brought out a thin strip of black cloth and began wrapping it around her eyes and head. I think a different fighting style that Tree inspired me to try someday would be better. Stolen content warning. This tale belongs on Royal Road. Report any occurrences elsewhere. Oh, a new fighting style, inspired by Ashlock of all people. Ahem, I mean Tree. Diana spread her wings and flexed her claws in excitement at the thrill of battle as something seemed to arise within her. This should be interesting. Stella suggested this fighting style would only work without my demonic mist obscuring me, and judging how she couldn't locate me and opened with a large-scale attack to get rid of it before, it must have been a serious hindrance to her. This short duel had already showcased the strengths of her newly improved demonic mist. The addition of demonic chi made it far superior to the water chi mist she could make before. Satisfied, Diana decided to hold back on flooding the area with her demonic mist again to allow Stella to try this new fighting style and also to not waste precious chi on a duel with a dear friend. Come on, Stella, show me what you got. Diana watched in anticipation as Stella's spatial ring flashed with silver light. A second sword appeared in her other hand while a dozen daggers manifested and orbited her with telekinesis. They all lit up with purple soul fire-like candles as their blade tips pointed toward her. With her eyes covered, Stella didn't even look at Diana as a dozen aflame daggers shot toward her. Perhaps for a mortal or weaker cultivator, these high-speed daggers may seem like a threat, but to Diana, they were like toothpicks the richer mortals liked to use after a crude meal. Bringing one of her feathered wings of darkness before her, she easily slapped them away but then felt a searing pain in her back. Ow! What the fuck was that? I blocked them. Diana didn't even have to look behind to realize what had pierced her back. Looking down, she saw that Stella had stabbed one of her swords through a portal near her feet. The attack hadn't gone too deep and had skillfully missed anything important, but it still made Diana grit her teeth in pain as Stella withdrew the blade and flicked off her blood onto the stone as the portal to her side snapped closed. Pay attention, Stella said as she snapped her fingers. Diana felt a ripple of spatial chi near her leg as a rift opened, and those same daggers she had just so easily slapped away before remerged. Pushing chi into her boots, her body blurred as she floated backward to dodge them. Above, Diana shrouded her fist in demonic mist chi, punched upward without looking, and shattered a freshly forming rift. It was well known that spatial rifts would become unstable and collapse when interacting with other chi types, especially demonic or void chi. It's why spatial cultivators couldn't simply redirect every attack that comes at them through portals. Phew, if Stella hadn't told me in time, that would have hurt. Left, right, what? Diana said as two portals opened on either side of her. Flexing her wings, she slapped both portals out of existence, causing them to snap closed with a gust of wind. Front, back. Diana twisted her body to destroy one and block a flurry of daggers from the other with her wings, but her eyes widened as she felt a ripple of spatial chi from above. Stella said simply as Diana howled out in pain. Two swords from separate portals overhead had struck down and dug into her shoulders. Her vision began to take on a red hue, and it felt like her brain was pulsating in her skull as blood rushed around her ears. She was enraged. Run, Stella, Diana hissed out as demonic mist poured out her mouth and wings which devoured the portals. Her control over the primal urge to tear Stella limb from limb brought on by surrendering to her demon bloodline for power was loosening. Stella didn't hear her warning as she remained on the ground with the blindfold on, directing the many portals opening and controlling the flying daggers. Diana felt her vision tunnel onto Stella as everything else faded into a haze. Chi surged through her body and into her artifact boots, and she rushed at Stella. The ground came faster than even Diana could process what was happening, and before she knew it, she punched a crater into the ground and shook the mountain peak. Missed me. Diana felt rage consume her as she rocketed up from the crater and turned to face Stella in the air. The blonde girl stood a bit away with a slight carefree smile as if everything was under her control. You know, if my bloodline wasn't active and I hadn't covered my eyes to heighten my perception of the spatial plane, you might have killed me with that. Diana wasn't listening, she couldn't listen, her body was moving on instinct and was far more focused on slashing Stella's neck so she would stop speaking than whatever she said. Run, Diana begged as the world once again blurred forward, and she briefly caught Stella's carefree smile turn to one of surprise before she vanished in a pop of spatial chi. Diana hated how she felt even more enraged because her prey had escaped. With empty claws, her head snapped in the direction Stella had teleported off to, and her body was already moving to complete its one and only task, slaughter. Diana, stop, Stella said as she vanished again with spatial step. I wish I could. Diana cursed inwardly. That's like telling a starving person to stop eating mid-bite or a drowning person not to breathe. I am not me anymore. I am something else. Please stop. I don't want to hurt you, Stella shouted from behind. Diana twisted around to follow her prey, and she blurred forward like an unstoppable phantom through the demonic mist that began to fill the mountain peak. Her speed and reaction times increased while Stella grew slower. I don't want to hurt you either, so get serious, Stella. I know you can stop me if you try. Diana yelled as she tried to wrestle back control of her body. I am not in control right now. I need you to knock me out. Diana hadn't felt this out of control in a long time and suspected it had something to do with her recent drastic leap in power. She hadn't given herself time to readjust and get used to feeding her bloodline the correct amount of demonic mist chi to have it awaken but not consume her very sense of self. Your bloodline is better than mine. Stella shouted back. It always has been. Even with the difference in our cultivation, I can't win. That filled Diana with a different kind of rage. Is this the bloodline you are so jealous of, Stella? Diana roared out as her claws blurred for Stella's throat and once again barely missed. Look at me. I am a fucking monster bound by my primal urges. Is this truly something to envy? To feel threatened by? I am trying to rip off my best friend's head against my will right now, and all she feels is jealousy. Stella reappeared a few meters away with a gasp. Sweat dampened the cloth over her eyes, and her hands were trembling. The fast-paced spatial steps within an inch of her life must have been getting to her as she felt genuinely threatened yet didn't wish to fight back with the necessary force. The demonic mist swirling around, dampening her senses, likely wasn't helping. Surely, if it got too dangerous, Ashlock or Maple would step in to stop me. So why haven't they yet? Diana wondered. She felt Ashlock's gaze follow her every move and knew of his capabilities, yet he wasn't even trying to suppress her with his presence, let alone sending one of his ents to deal with her. There's no way Ashlock can't see I am out of control and in a berserk state, so the only other option is he wants me to keep going. To keep hunting Stella like a monster. But why? Just surrender. Diana snarled. If you surrender the duel, I may regain control and stop being a monster. I don't want to hurt you. You think Knox would have stopped killing Tree if I fucking surrendered? Stella snapped back. Would the assassins sent to kill me in childhood have retreated if I begged? No, they would not. I stand by what I said. Despite the cost, your bloodline is better than mine, and I can't win. Whether you are sane or not, does that matter? Monster or human, I face an opponent I can't defeat in my current state. I am not jealous of you. I fear you. Diana surged forward, and Stella disappeared once again. What I need is to improve way both do, Stella said calmly across the peak. That is why the duel will not end. Not until we have reached our limits and surpassed our current selves. But it's not me you are fighting, Diana hissed as she turned and stood at full height with her wings stretched. I am moving with nothing but the instinct to kill. I wouldn't want it any other way, Stella said with that infuriatingly calm smile as she tore off the headband and stared at her with those tranquil eyes. Let's both become monsters together. A strange aura of pressure seemed to come from Stella as the tips of her hair turned white, and she began to walk forward. The air around her cracked and warped with every step, and the purple soul fire took on a lighter hue. Diana didn't rush forward at the opportunity to kill. Rather, she felt the red hue plaguing her vision and the rage consuming her mind slowly retreat, and she instinctually took a step back. Yet despite her retreat, she still wasn't in complete control. Her body that was hellbent on slaughter knew when to take a step back if death was assured. The hunter instinctually knew it had become the prey. Chapter 258. A Cosmic Truth. Despite Ashlock's protests in her mind, Stella refused to let the duel end. She knew it had deviated from its original purpose. Diana had become consumed by her bloodline and entered a berserk state where all she saw was red, but Stella felt like she was on the cusp of something. Now wasn't the time to pull back but rather push against her limits. It was hard to describe, but down to her bones, she knew something more was locked away inside. Some untapped potential she had yet to unleash for reasons not yet known. She had spent months toiling away on ways to even use her bloodline's potential only to feel a hint of this dormant power when facing down Knox and protecting Tree, but she had the daylights beaten out of her before it could manifest. This time, however, was different. Diana was still a few stages below Stella, even in her bloodline form. So logically, victory was possible, perhaps even assured. Still, there was a gap in the fighting experience, and Diana's demon form gave her unmatched speed and strength that helped her easily bridge the gap and even surpass Stella to the point she felt fear. Fear of death, but also fear of being outdone. Diana was not only a demon in reality but also a mental one for Stella to overcome. Diana showed what was possible, the heights that could be achieved from a bloodline's power, which Stella desperately craved. It wasn't until Diana tried to call off the duel because she claimed she was a monster acting on nothing but instincts that something clicked within Stella's mind. If Diana could surrender herself to instincts, why couldn't she? Her bloodline had already activated without her direct control until now, so why was she trying to have complete control over it? Just trust in the process. Stella assured herself as she removed her bandage and returned to reality from the spatial plane. Her bloodline was active already, that much she knew, as that hallmark tranquil calmness that spread from her mind to her fingertips was present alongside the feeling of being zoned in. Information of her surroundings flowed through her mind at a nearly limitless rate alongside an encroaching headache. The many portals, the dozen daggers being manipulated with telekinesis, her own position in relation to Diana, and pockets of safety away from the demonic mist were all under her control simultaneously. Focus never wavering or deviating from one thing to another. This was the bloodline experience she had grown used to, but something nagging at the back of her mind knew this was not the limit. It was as if there was so much more to explore just beyond the curtain, and Diana had driven her to the point of discovering what could be possible. Stella stopped thinking so much and surrendered herself to her instincts. Whatever felt right in her gut was what she would do, even if it would cost her losing her head to Diana's claws. Bizarrely, she felt the urge to step forward toward Diana, the overpowered demoness that had spent the last few minutes trying to swipe at her throat with razor-sharp claws shrouded in demonic mist. As she walked, in the silence of her mind where she kept her thoughts empty to be in tune with her instincts, she heard what could only be described as a whisper. It was like that voice in the back of one's mind that warns of danger or opportunity, a sixth sense perhaps. The whispers gradually got louder to the point they filled the silent void of her mind. Refusing to ruin this moment by having thoughts, Stella let the whispers in without questioning their origin or intent. Just trust in the process. It was terrifying to surrender oneself to their most primal form and to continue walking to what she believed was certain death. But the death never came. Stella wasn't sure when it happened, but the air around her had started warping and cracking without her intent, and to her surprise, Diana didn't rush forward at the opportunity to kill her. No, stepped back in what Stella saw as fear. The whispers got louder and louder as they seemed to reach a zenith. Stella's ears started ringing, and her head felt pressured as if her skull was struggling to contain the chorus. She wanted nothing more than to scream at them to be silent and to nurse her head, but she pressed on. Just trust in the process. It was like a mantra she repeated over and over. She was doing everything against what she felt was right, but she knew being stubborn was not the way to change and improve. But then the sky vanished. The blue sky filled with fluffy white clouds that lazily went by. It was always there, a constant in anyone's life and therefore pushed into the background, was gone. Diana didn't seem as distressed as someone should be at the sudden disappearance of the sky, so it must be something only she could see. Stella stopped to look up, and what could only be described as the inside of a giant golden tree carved out into a spiraling library of celestial origin that spread upwards into infinity loomed overhead in the non-existent sky. Despite its incomprehensible nature, Stella felt a strange attachment and familiarity to the place, as if it had always been there, just out of reach and understanding. Between the millions of bookshelves, ethereal streams of condensed knowledge flowed, and simply focusing on one for a single second made Stella's head pulse and the ringing grow louder. Still, even from such a brief interaction with the celestial library, Stella became confident of one thing. I always felt like learning new things came easily to me. Rather than resistance to learning like others, for me, it felt like training an old muscle. Whether it be learning an ancient runic language to the point of fluency in a year from nothing but dusty old books, or mastering alchemy in a matter of weeks to the level one could nearly win a tournament. People called me talented, but I never felt that way, as that retracted from the work I thought I had put in, which didn't make any sense. But now it is all so clear. Stolen story. Please report. Stella smiled. All of this is me. My past lives. Arrogant as always, a voice boomed down from above, and to Stella's horror, she saw a humanoid cosmos floating within the vast library and glaring down at her with stars for eyes. Just gazing upon this celestial being made her body begin to falter and her consciousness waver. What do you mean? Stella squeaked out as she felt incredibly small and pathetic. Ashlock's gaze contained this same otherworldliness, but nothing to this extent. As the carrier of an ancient bloodline and to tap into its latent power, it's understandable to be arrogant. You are what the heavens would call special. The cosmos said, shaking the world. However, this knowledge has been meticulously collected over the eons by your ancestors, not you. Instead of past lives, it would be more correct to say their knowledge lives on through you. I digress. There is much for you to learn, but you are far too weak as of now. Stella screamed in agony. Every word the cosmos spoke felt like the world falling upon her, shaking her soul to its core. It was painful, so painful, but she gritted her teeth and glared up at the cosmos. I have already learned and suffered enough. Tell me more. I can handle it. Stella half begged and demanded. She hated nothing more than being kept in the dark and dismissed when she was so close. Foolish child. Knowledge is power. The cosmos thundered. Those of our bloodline have ruled the realms since time immemorial, but knowledge without strength is as helpful as giving a sword to an ant. But I am not an ant. Stella protested. I am almost at the peak of the star core realm. I have mastered ancient runic languages and alchemy. I even know how to make runic formations, and my skills with the sword are far above those of my age. I seek knowledge anything. So please. Knowledge without strength to act upon it is nothing but a curse, the cosmos bellowed. You will wish to change the world, yet be powerless to do so. Stella felt like coughing up blood at this point, but she refused to back down. Call it greed, stupidity, stubbornness, or even arrogance, she didn't care. She was determined to get something of value from this exchange rather than more questions, even if this cosmos did nothing but look down on her and disregard her achievements. I don't believe you, Stella insisted. How could knowing be worse than being kept in the dark? To her surprise, the cosmos didn't berate her and call her a foolish child. Instead, it had an impossibly wide grin and leaned closer. How, indeed, do you dare to find out? Stella had to admit the cosmos's drastic tone change and unsettling smile made her second guess her provocation. But what could it possibly say to make her take back her words? I do dare, Stella replied, shuddering down to her soul when the cosmos smiled even wider. Very well then, I will give you a hint at the truth or so I claim. Without power, how can you differentiate reality from fiction? The cosmos laughed, and Stella felt her consciousness start to escape her. Stella crestfallen, have you ever wondered who your mother is? Do you remember her face or voice? My mother. Stella thought hard as the ringing in her ears worsened, and she felt ready to pass out. I was so young when she left me, how could I possibly remember her? But now that I think about it, Father never mentioned much about her either. Do you not find it strange that you lack many brothers, sisters, and cousins as a noble family in this backwater sect that you are a part of? Having a large extended family is the norm in a world where people can live for centuries. So where is yours? Stella racked her brain for an answer. Why had she never found that strange? Diana was the last of her family, but that's because the rest were wiped out, and there were still likely a few cultivators with the Ravenborn blood out there. But she had come into this world with basically only a father and whispers of a mother she had no memory of. There was the story about her family sacrificing themselves for the patriarch. But she had later learned that the patriarch was simply keeping her around to use her as a pill furnace, so that story lost its validity in her eyes. For all she knew, they had been made up as there was no evidence of their legacy. No artifacts or personal items were left from their supposedly long lives. I don't know, Stella admitted. Her family history had always been a bit of a mystery, and with them all gone and leaving her alone on this mountain peak with nothing but murderous servants as a child, it was not like she had anybody to ask. Could you tell me? The cosmos beamed as it leaned even closer, its star-like eyes twinkling with a mixture of malice and excitement. Ever wondered why you formed such an attachment to Ashlock? Or how can you understand the thoughts and focus of the other trees around you? Your dear mother is not human. She is, in fact, the world tree. The very thing Ashlock will have to destroy to fulfill his destiny. Stella froze as she failed to comprehend the absurdity she had just been told. Her mother was the world tree. How was that even possible? How could that even work? Stella dropped to one knee and felt the vast celestial library carved within a golden tree overhead begin to fade away as her mind shut down. My mother is the world tree. Stella couldn't believe it. Then what of my father? Not Ashlock, but the bastard who abandoned me here in death. Having read her thoughts, the cosmos answered, he lives. Stella coughed up blood as the sky flickered back into existence. The peaceful blue sky that had served as nothing but a background now seemed far more sinister. What other secrets could it be concealing? Stella flopped onto the ground as her body gave up. Her vision was blurry, and the ringing had yet to cease. Every thought she had followed with a spike of pain. She wanted to cry. So she did. Warm tears streaked down her cheeks, and she wanted nothing more than a hug now. This was all too much. Diana paused from taking steps back as the air around Stella stopped crackling from her mere presence. Yet she did not charge forth. That insanity and bloodlust had gone from her eyes. It seemed she had been shocked into control. You win, Diana, Stella croaked with a light smile. It felt oddly insignificant to admit defeat compared to the world-shaking thing she had just experienced. What nonsense are you sprouting? Diana said as she retracted her wings and claws. Are you okay? What happened? No, I am not okay at all. Stella said as the ground beneath her began to rumble, and she felt something emerge and wrap around her waist. Glancing down with all the effort she could muster, her eyes widened as she saw it was Ashlock's root. Which was strange since it felt nowhere near as solid as she had expected. Calm down, Stella, don't cry. I got you. The thousand voices she was so used to rang in her mind as she felt her body lifted from the ground, and she was carried over to Ash. She was gently brought into his canopy and laid against his trunk on one of the thickest branches. The root remained wrapped around her to stop her exhausted body from falling, and to her surprise, it reached up and patted her on the head. There, Ash said, everything is all right. Rest here for a while, and tell me what happened when you have recovered. Stella reached up and held onto the root resting on her head. Don't ever let go. Wouldn't dream of it. I want to stay like this forever. Stella smiled as she felt the exhaustion catch up to her, and she fell asleep in Ashlock's embrace. Chapter 259. Ancient Bloodline. Ashlock had seen Stella distraught, scared, and angry in recent years, but she had almost only ever cried when she feared his demise. She was usually quite a strong girl when it came to her own problems, so something drastic must have occurred for her to go from battle maniac to crying within seconds. I wonder what happened. Ashlock used the tip of his ethereal root to wipe away the tears streaking down Stella's sleeping face. She had passed out and fallen into a deep sleep within a second, so it was likely backlash for whatever she had done at the end of the duel. For a moment, I felt the pressure of a being on the same level as Senior Lee coming from Stella, Ashlock mused as he continued patting her head as she peacefully slept. She then looked to the sky and collapsed, coughing blood a moment later. It was all bizarre, and all he could hope was that Stella would fully recover and fill him in on the details. He may have dulled emotions as a tree, but he knew when to put his curiosity aside and give her some space to recover before firing off questions. See, I can be a caring dad sometimes, Ashlock chuckled as he enjoyed this unintended feature of his new ethereal roots skill. It effectively turned his roots into limbs he could move freely so he could finally give a sort of hug. Even if you were a rascal. I told you so many times to stop the duel because Diana was out of control, but you stubbornly pressed forward, so I can only hope whatever you saw in the sky was worth it. I can give her sweet dreams if you will allow it. Ashlock looked down with his demonic eye at Elaine, who was still sitting on the bench with a deep look of concern on her face. With your illusions? Ashlock asked. Elaine nodded. She looks very distressed, so it might help her sleep peacefully. Ashlock glanced back at Stella. Her hands that had been gripping the root patting her head had fallen to her sides, and she had a look of unease on her sleeping face. Maple was curled up in her lap and looking up at her. If you are sure it will work, that would be nice. Sure, it's a simple illusion shaped by the happy thoughts in her mind, no matter how dormant they are. Elaine stood up and effortlessly jumped to Ashlock's lowest branch. Sometimes, he forgot that cultivators were superhuman, but seeing Elaine, who looked like a nerdy researcher, easily jumping 3 meters at a time up to where Stella was situated, reminded him that looks could be deceiving. Elaine gently tapped her finger on Stella's head, and within seconds, Stella's face transitioned from one of unsettled terror to a light smile. Her breathing also became less erratic and more relaxed. Thank you, Ashlock said. No worries, it's the least I could do. Elaine moved Stella's hair from her nose and put it behind her ear with a sigh. Almost hard to remember how scary she can be when I see her sleeping like this. Ashlock still vividly remembered the debate where Stella ordered Elaine's death. Now, here Elaine was, wishing her sweet dreams. She has been getting better, Ashlock said, as she gains more life experience and interacts with a wide variety of people, her dark view of the world has slowly shifted. Or at least I like to think so. I can only imagine what she has been through. Elaine stepped back with a frown. I have been told things here and there, but they paint a very vague picture. Yeah, it's been complicated, to say the least. Diana appeared in a blur next to Elaine, making her almost lose her balance on the branch. Ah, you scared me? Elaine readjusted her glasses. Are you sane? Yes, I am, Diana said as her eyes, which were black like ink, transitioned to her usual dull gray. They flickered between Elaine, Stella, and Ashlock's demonic eye. So, how is she? We don't know, Ashlock admitted, but Elaine used her illusion chi to help her sleep peacefully, so I suppose we will see when she wakes up. What about you? Oh, me, Diana blinked, surprised by the question. Not great, honestly. I fed my bloodline too much power and lost myself to its rage when Stella managed to land those hits on me. I'm sorry. If not for Stella constantly telling him to stay out of it, Ashlock would have stopped the duel then and there. No need to be sorry. I take responsibility for whatever happens next, Ashlock reassured her. Stella told me to stay out of it, so I did. I trust her, but in hindsight, maybe listening to her was a bad idea. We will have to see if I made the wrong decision when she wakes up. Diana nodded as she massaged her temples. Yeah, that sounds like something she would do. Crazy. If not for that sudden pressure that shocked me out of my berserk state, I really would have taken her head off. I need to go rest. The backlash is killing my head. Go for it. I need to rest too. Ashlock sighed. What a fucking insane morning it had been. The sun had hardly risen, but he already wanted not just today to be over but this entire week. He had reached the bottleneck for nascent soul, upgraded one of his abilities with void chi, turned Knox into a tree, and watched Diana and Stella almost kill each other in a duel that went way too far. All the while, he was still heavily injured with a large cut in his trunk that was leaking chi. Diana spread her majestic feathered wings but paused. Before I go, I wanted to give you this. Oh, a present. It's a bundle of demonic mist chi flowers I managed to bring back from the mystic realm. Diana placed the bundle of black and blue flowers on the branch. Not sure if you can do anything with them, though a grove of them would be nice. Only if you want to, of course. Diana, you are like family to me. Ashlock picked up the flowers with telekinesis and brought them before his eye for inspection. Forget just a grove. I will give you a bastion of demonic mist chi someday. Just give me some time, though. I must divert my resources to reach the nascent soul realm for now. Thank you, Ashlock, that means a lot. Diana gave a fang-filled smile as she turned to leave. Call me when Stella wakes up. I suppose I will head out as well then and cultivate at the Illusion Chi Grove. Elaine jumped down. If you need anything, you know where to find me. Sure thing. See you both soon, Ashlock told them. Diana glided into the distance while Elaine walked through the mist wall and vanished from sight as she headed toward the mountain ridge of groves. Now, it was just him and a sleeping Stella. Making sure she was secured in place with his roots so she wouldn't fall during her sleep, he focused on the new flower Diana had just given him. He twirled it around for a while with telekinesis before his eye until a system prompt appeared. Sinister Fog Bellflower analyzed. Opening his blooming root flower production skill menu. Sure enough, this flower had joined his list of possible flowers he could grow. Might as well get a grove for Diana going before I sleep, Ashlock said, searching for a nice area with Eye of the Tree God. Since he also wanted some of his offspring to take on the demonic mist affinity, he decided to head to the east to the demonic tree forest. He selected a large area among the newly growing trees and spawned hundreds of sinister fog bellflowers. Chi flowed from his star core through his roots, and a field of black and blue flowers bloomed into existence, and a demonic mist soon started forming. Ashlock let out a long yawn as he returned to Red Vine Peak. He was beyond exhausted. Since it was still daytime, he retreated into his mind and fell into a state similar to daydreaming, focusing all his nutrients and chi into repairing himself. He had earned a long rest. Idletree Daily Sign in System. Day 3598. If you come across this story on Amazon, it's taken without permission from the author. Report it. Daily credit 35. Sacrifice credit 2565. Sign in. Ashlock stirred awake and wondered if he was miscounting. I swear I had 33 daily credits last time I checked. Had 2 days really passed? Swiftly leaving his mind with more energy than usual, he glanced around. The sun was once again peeking over the mountains in the distance as if he had gone back in time by an hour. Stella was still peacefully asleep in his roots, and there was no sign of the others. Did I really sleep for 2 days? Ashlock wondered if there was a quick way to check. Looking around, he eventually looked down at himself and saw that the large cut in his side made by Knox was half healed, and the cracks that had spread throughout his body were gone. Damage calculated at 17%. Repair body with credits. Yes, no. No way. Ashlock dismissed the prompt. With how high his cultivation was now, the cost of such an instant repair would be steep, and he needed to save every credit he could to form his inner world and reach nascent soul realm. That aside, this amount of healing should be impossible in a single day, so maybe 2 days really had passed. Which made the fact Stella was still asleep so concerning. Had using her bloodline or whatever she saw in the sky inflicted such a backlash. Larry was also still in his cocoon of silver ash, so it was quiet. I wonder how Knox is readjusting to her life as a tree. Ashlock would grin if he could. He hadn't heard anything from the Red Claws regarding her yet, so it should be going well. Morning tree. A sheepish voice drew his attention to Stella, rubbing her eyes and yawning. I had the most pleasant dream. All the terrible things I'd been told went away like a spring breeze. You can thank Elaine for that, Ashlock said as softly as he could as he loosened his hold on her waist now that she was awake. She used illusions to help you sleep because you seemed deeply troubled. Oh, that was nice of her, Stella said absent-mindedly as she stared into the distance through a gap in his canopy. A long silence followed as the morning breeze rustled Ashlock's leaves and played with Stella's hair. Do you want to talk about it? Ashlock eventually said. Talk about what? He wasn't exactly sure. Stella had mentioned something about being told terrible things. I don't know, Stella muttered as she tore her eyes away from the horizon and looked down at Maple in her lap. There's just so much to unpack, that I don't even know where or how to start. Diana asked me to get her when you woke up. Should I? Maybe she can help you work through it. Stella slowly nodded. Okay, some of it will be interesting to her, I suppose. Ashlock went and got Diana, who had been resting under the water chi trees at the edge of the mountain peak. Stella, you slept a long time, Diana said as she landed on the branch and gave her a warm smile. It's been a few days since our duel. Are you fine? Physically? Sure I am. Stella cracked her neck and rolled her shoulders. I feel quite well rested, actually. Or at least as well as I could after what happened. Diana's smile faltered. Look, if I caused whatever that was, I am sorry. Stella waved her off. No. If anything, you helped me reach the ultimate state of my bloodline. I should be thanking you. Ultimate state. You learned more about bloodlines? Ashlock asked, unable to hold back his curiosity anymore. Yes, I did, alongside some other things, Stella said mysteriously. It seemed like a lot was going on in her mind as her gaze kept growing distant, and she kept opening her lips as if about to say something but then holding back. Was this ultimate version you speak of the source of that presence I felt? Diana asked as she sat on Ashlock's branch and let her legs and wings hang off the sides. Sort of. Stella looked at Diana, though I was suffering under it just as much as you were, if not more. That explains why you coughed up blood and fainted for 2 days. Diana shook her head in disbelief. That pressure from a few meters away was enough to scare my bloodline to where it came from. What was it that has such a presence? Stella breathed out a long sigh. That's the thing, I don't know. It never gave me its name. Just called me arrogant because of my ancient bloodline. Ancient bloodline. Ashlock was growing more confused. Let me start from the top. Otherwise, even I will get confused. Stella spent a minute organizing her thoughts before continuing. Let's start with the topic that caused this mess. Bloodlines, to my understanding, have 3 stages. Let's call them passive, active, and ultimate. Now, I don't know if all bloodlines have all 3, nor do I know if everyone has a bloodline or only a certain few. All I know is I have an ancient bloodline, and I was able to tap into all 3 states. Larry did say there was something ancient smelling about you and Diana, Ashlock chimed in. I suppose it was this ancient bloodline he smelled. Stella glanced up at the silver ash cocoon overhead. Yeah, looks like he was right. So, what is up with these 3 states of bloodlines? Diana asked. Passive is the easiest one to explain, but bear in mind that I am working off many assumptions here, so this could all be wrong. However, I believe everyone with a bloodline will have some degree of this passive effect. Stella explained. In my case, the passive effect of my bloodline was the ability to learn things faster than usual from a young age. Learning was never hard. It always felt like warming up an old muscle rather than training up a new one, if that makes sense. You could almost call it my talent, if you will. Ashlock found that made a lot of sense. You always were quick on the uptake. So, it was your bloodline that helped you progress so quickly in so many different areas. Yeah, Stella nodded, though it didn't hand those achievements to me on a silver platter. For example, as Diana knows well, I still had to spend every waking hour for a year straight to learn the ancient runic language to speak to you. A level of effort was still required on my part. It just came easier to me than it would to others. Diana nodded. She worked so hard it was amazing to watch. Calling in a talent sounds about right then, Ashlock agreed. You are one of the hardest working people I know, so I didn't say that to diminish your achievements. But it does help explain how you reached such mastery in many fields. Yeah, and that brings me onto the second stage of a bloodline, the active one. Stella continued. Diana's transformation into a demoness is the best example of this. But for me, it was being able to enter the zone and hyper-focus on a task at the cost of a nasty headache for a bit afterward. This active part of my bloodline helped me win the alchemy tournament, and also, In many fights, it helped me manage the flow of battle. Yet the conditions to activate it are still rather vague compared to Diana, who simply feeds her bloodline power to manifest it. Are you getting jealous again? Diana teased, even after seeing what happens when I let it run amok. Stella shrugged. I see now that you have a more straightforward way of using the active part of your bloodline because the cost to use it is higher. My bloodline often activates when I need it, and the cost is nothing but a headache and exhaustion, whereas you trade your sanity for power. It took a lot for me to realize that. I focused far more on the result than the cost, which led to my jealousy. At least you can see that now. Diana sighed and leaned back, looking up into Ashlock's canopy. So, what's this about an ultimate state you mentioned? Once again, Stella became hesitant. She tried and failed to speak for a long time, with only the rustling leaves, chirps of birds, and streaks of sunlight accompanying the awkwardness. I surrendered to my instincts, Stella eventually muttered. I got the idea after seeing you embrace your demon form. In doing so, the whispers grew louder and louder, and then the sky was gone. Ashlock's demonic eye swiveled to gaze up at the vast blue sky. It looked the same as always, with clouds lazily floating by. Streams of various chi types went by, as always. Nothing seemed amiss. In its place, a vast celestial library appeared carved from the inside of a golden tree that spread up to infinity. Stella raised her arms as if trying to paint a picture. I didn't realize until it appeared, but it had always been there, feeding me knowledge. And upon witnessing this library of knowledge, I thought I had gathered it all from past lives until it told me otherwise. At the mention of a golden tree, Ashlock's thoughts instantly drifted to his many dreams and visions of the past world trees that he sometimes saw after unlocking S-grade skills. This felt like too much of a coincidence. He dreamed of world trees, while Stella had access to a library made within one. Crazy celestial libraries appearing out of nowhere aside, Diana crocked a brow. Past lives. Ashlock wanted to pause on the whole library made from a world tree, but clearly, there were even more things Stella had to share, considering she passed over it so quickly. Stella nodded. I felt a faint connection to all the information contained in that library that loomed overhead. Almost like a fragmented memory of a distant past, but in the moment, I was convinced that it was all knowledge I had collected in past lives. Ashlock found it interesting that Stella had a concept of past lives. Was the cycle of reincarnation known in this world? So what happened next? Ashlock asked. A humanoid cosmos formed within the library and glared down at me with stars for eyes. It was the source of that pressure that made Diana step back and me to cough blood. Stella shuddered. If I had to guess, it was the ego of the library or perhaps one of my ancestors. It informed me with words that shook my soul that this was all the knowledge my ancestors acquired throughout the eons. That I was arrogant as always and a carrier of an ancient bloodline. Arrogant as always. That makes it sound like this cosmos has been watching you or has met you before, Ashlock said, and Diana added, or there have been others with your bloodline in the past that were also arrogant. Could be either honestly. Its way with words was so confusing, and it didn't help that listening to it hurt so bad. So your bloodline's ultimate state is to peel back the veil of reality to expose a library that has always been there and to be shouted at by a cosmos? Ashlock asked. Stella shook her head. Simply focusing on a single stream of knowledge between the books gave me deeper insights into bloodlines. If I could have stayed there longer and explored more, I am sure I would have learned more than everything contained in that Azure Clan library. Stella's face scrunched up in disgust and rage, but that cosmos ensured that was not the case. It called me a foolish child who didn't understand that knowledge is a curse, that knowledge is power, and without the capabilities to act upon knowledge, it's as useful as giving an ant a sword. Ashlock actually agreed with those words, but now wasn't the time to voice those thoughts. So what did you say in response? I called it out on its bullshit, Stella said bluntly, or at least I thought I did. I really believed knowing was better than being kept in the dark. Stella trailed off at the end. The edges of her eyes started getting red, and her bottom lip quivered. What did it tell you, Stella? Ashlock asked. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, of course, but I can see you are hurting. Stella curled up into a ball, and while sniffling, she said something unbelievable. My mother is the World Tree. Chapter 260. World Tree's daughter. Stella's mother was the World Tree. How the fuck was that even possible? Ashlock had questions. Many questions. Even with his system's vast powers, he wasn't yet capable of making a human-looking child and doubted he ever would. The image of Stella's father turned to a treehugger in his mind, and he felt his bark shudder at the thought what horrible, unspeakable acts had occurred for this to happen. Ashlock's mind was freed from its spiraling thoughts as he heard the silence broken by sniffling. Stella was still curled up in a ball to hide her face, and the more he looked at her, the more implausible her mother being the world tree seemed. No matter how you looked at it, she was human through and through. Senior Lee has made it very clear that looks can be deceiving, Ashlock mused, but it still seemed impossible. Stella wasn't some godly being from a higher realm of creation but just a girl abandoned by her family, right? Diana seemed stunned by Stella's words and unable to form a response as her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, so to fill the silence, Ashlock spoke to his daughter. What do you think about it? Stella raised her head with red eyes. What do you mean? Do you even believe that your mother is the world tree? Are the words of the cosmos to be trusted? Stella stared off into the distance with a look of realization. No. It kept insisting that knowledge without the power to act upon it was nothing but a curse. When I pressed on for answers, it laughed at me as if I was a fool and told me, very well then, I will give you a hint at the truth or so I claim. Without power, how can you differentiate reality from fiction? So this cosmos thing could be lying. Ashlock said, did it provide any evidence that your mother is the world tree? Stella frowned. No hard evidence, but it did make some good points. I have no memory of my mother, and my father hardly ever mentioned her. My family backstory is suspicious at best, with my family apparently dying in the last beast tide protecting the patriarch. Was that all this cosmic being provided as evidence? Diana said while tilting her head, those are some weak points. Stella shook her head. The cosmos also pointed out that I formed an unusual connection with Ashlock at a young age and that I can understand the thoughts and focus of trees around me. Huh. Diana said, you can do that. Stella smiled weakly. Strange, right? When I was young, if I touched Ash's bark, I could tell if he was sleeping. As I've grown older, I can now feel if his focus is on me, and I can feel the emotions of his offspring like Willow. Okay. That is weird. Diana bit her nail. In thought, do you have a dual core with nature affinity or maybe nature Tao comprehension? Stella shook her head. Is it a technique? Perhaps one taught when you were a child, so you forgot about learning it. Stella shook her head again. I don't need to use chi or even think about it. Actually, until the cosmos mentioned it as a reason my mother is the world tree, I never thought about why I could sense the emotions and focus of trees. Stella shrugged. It felt normal to me, like breathing or blinking. Maybe you really are part tree. Diana squinted at Stella as if she was about to grow twigs out of her ears. I still don't buy it, Ashlock said. Stella isn't the only one who has noticed my spiritual gaze and my offspring emit their emotions through chi fluctuations. Considering we grew up together and how much Stella depended on my presence, I wouldn't be surprised if she grew more attuned to my spiritual gaze and the fluctuations. Diana tapped her chin. That also sounds reasonable. Stella gripped her head and pulled at her hair in frustration. I have no idea what to believe. That stupid cosmos was right. Knowledge really is a curse. Today would have been like any other, and I would have lived on in blissful ignorance if I had kept my mouth shut, but no, I just had to demand answers. I believe the cosmos is trying to teach you a lesson here, Ashlock said, which it seems to have succeeded in doing. Unless it told you anything else we can use to verify its words. The world tree isn't exactly close by to ask. Stella froze at his words. There was something equally as shocking, which is made worse because it feels far more possible to be true. What is it? My father. Stella's eyes widened as if she had just remembered. The cosmos said he is still alive. Alive. I thought he died trying to force his way to the star core realm. That's what I was told through word of mouth. Stella agreed. I never actually saw his dead body for myself, though. But I assumed it was true because I was still young. Assuming he is alive and we found him, what would you? I don't care. That man is dead to me, Stella grumbled as she buried her head back into her knees. I grieved for him. I cried myself to sleep, wishing he would come back. But he never did. He left me here on this mountain all alone with murderous servants. Stella leaned against his trunk and muttered, you are a better father than he ever was. Much better at sticking around. Ashlock had to admit that he felt some relief hearing Stella's opinions on her father. Thank you, Stella. That means a lot, Ashlock said as he moved his root to pat her head. Ash. What should I do? Stella asked after a while, looking up at his canopy. Should I believe the cosmos? Well, let's think. Verifying if your mother is truly the world tree would be difficult. Senior Lee told me the world tree is capable of something close to speech through complex emotions, so we could ask her, but she is far away in the center of the Celestial Empire. Ashlock sighed. There is also the issue that Senior Lee gave me the divine fragment that was supposed to be for the world tree, and there's a chance she will try to kill me for it. If you come across this story on Amazon, it's taken without permission from the author. Report it. Stella bit her lip. The cosmos did say that the world tree was the very thing you would have to destroy to fulfill your destiny. That's a rather dramatic way of phrasing it, but that's not far from the truth. 9 divine fragments are spread throughout the realms, and one needs to acquire all 9 to become a god. I hold one, and the world tree needs it to initiate the era of ascension and rise to the next layer of creation. Diana raised her hand. Question. Couldn't we bring the world tree another of these divine fragments? We could, Ashlock agreed, but then neither of us could become gods as one fragment would be held by the other. It's complicated. There's a whole cycle that the world tree doesn't know it's a part of, so it will never reach true divinity even if it had my fragment, but I have a chance of ascending to godhood and ending this accursed cycle. With the help of you two and the others, of course. I don't really get it. Diana leaned back on her arms and gazed up into his canopy, but it sounds like this world tree is going to be bad news to try and get answers from. Yes, as a monarch realm being, I am not in a position to defend myself if I catch its ire, Ashlock said, or at least I think so. Monarch realm is an incomprehensible level of power to me. Also, I do not know about the world tree's combat capabilities other than Senior Lee saying the world tree's presence was the reason the Celestial Empire could fend off the beast tides. Diana whistled. Who knew your mother was so scary, Stella? Don't even joke about that. Stella glared at Diana. If she really is my mother, it opens up far too many questions that I fear the answers to. How was I born? Is my father human? What am I? Why am I out here in a demonic sect rather than living near her in the Celestial Empire? Will I turn into a tree and become as lazy as Ash? Oi, Ashlock interjected. When you experience time like I do and have a body the size of a continent, you are allowed to be lazy. I could check on my roots in the far west and then head to the east, and I will be in a different time zone. Still lazy, Stella crossed her arms. With winter coming up, I am looking forward to being even lazier, Ashlock replied with amusement. Since the nights would be longer, he could spend even more time under the 9 vertical moons, bathing in their lunar energies. To him, it was as pleasant as a visit to the spa had been, and he enjoyed the faster growth of himself and his offspring. If I do turn into a tree, I am going to grow right over there, Stella said, pointing at the ground near the bench. I will speak to you all day and night whether you like it or not. So you better hope it doesn't happen. So, not much different from now. Ashlock laughed. You know, for someone with legs, you sure like being rooted in place. I have portals, Stella pouted. If I am needed somewhere or I want to visit someone, I can be there in seconds. Wait, are all spatial cultivators this lazy? Is this the personality trait of spatial cultivators? Our sample size isn't the best. Willow and I are both trees. Titus is a walking tree, and Stella might be part tree. I am not part tree. Darn it, Stella muttered, but it fell on deaf ears. Diana hummed. I remember my father ranting about Grand Elder Valandor from the disciplinary committee, who is known to use strange white flame spatial techniques and is often late and lazy. Wait, Grand Elder Valandor. Stella said. That name sounds super familiar. I think it was one of my father's friends. Oh yeah, I think he visited here when I was 9, and I tried to introduce him to Tree, but he wouldn't give him any fruit. A decision Ashlock was still glad about to this day. That guy was bad news. Wasn't he the person who said you had to pass that Grand Elder exam to stay as the sole heir to Red Vine Peak? Ashlock asked as he pictured the white-robed man with a presence that made the whole building creak as it tried to bow to him. Oh yeah, I forgot about that, Stella snorted in amusement. I believed it was impossible to reach Star Core Realm within 5 years, yet I still have a year left, and I am nearing the bottleneck for the nascent Soul Realm. Hey, wouldn't it be rather funny to turn up to the exam stronger than the disciplinary committee members overseeing the test? Not to mention your pure spirit roots and ancient bloodline, Diana shook her head with a smile. It's all so ridiculous. Those old farts would either faint in rage or accuse you of being someone from a higher realm wearing your skin. They would kill you on the spot. Do you think Larry would let that happen? Ashlock said. With his evolution, he will be stepping into a level of power on par with the nascent soul realm. He might even be able to threaten the patriarch. That's true. Diana muttered as she gazed up at the cocoon of silver ash nestled among Ashlock's branches overhead. Stella giggled. If I summoned the bloodline library again and scared them with the cosmos presence with Larry at my side, maybe they would bow down and call me patriarch. You would like that, wouldn't you? Diana smirked. I still haven't forgotten how you had hundreds of illusionary Elaines bow down to you. Shut up. Stella glanced away, her face going red. Okay. We are getting off topic. Ashlock paused as he gained the girl's attention, asking the world tree if it's Stella's mother is far too risky, so the better person to ask would be Stella's father, who is apparently still alive. If he is found alive, that gives more validity to the cosmos's ridiculous claim about the world tree. Are we in agreement? Both nodded. But how are we supposed to find him? Stella asked. I haven't heard about him since he supposedly died. I don't even know his real name or remember his appearance. Ashlock had anticipated this issue. Stella hadn't seen her father in a long time and had still been a child back then when he supposedly died. Luckily, we have some leads. Grand Elder Valandor, for example, should know more about his whereabouts or at least his name and appearance as they were friends, right? Ashlock suggested. Another option would be buying information through the Eternal Pursuit Pavilion. Diana grinned, showing her fangs. Is it finally time for me to begin my life as a bounty hunter and pill dealer? You both can. We still have those jade masks we looted from those foolish bounty hunters that hide your face and distort your voice, right? Diana's spatial ring flashed, and 2 masks appeared. Sure do. Perfect. You can both use those and climb through the ranks, and maybe we can finally sell some fucking pills. Ashlock couldn't believe how they managed to do everything except sell pills. I also need to eat star core cultivators of each basic affinity to ascend to nascent soul realm, so you could use some of the earnings from the pills to place bounties on each other and the Ashfallen Trading Company. Stella and Diana exchanged a grin. On that topic, I have evolved my roots to become more ethereal, Ashlock added as he patted Stella's head again. It lets me do things like this, which is neat. But more importantly, the space within them is also now compressed, so the tunnels you once slid down to get into the cavern will act more like portals. Once I finish evolving all my roots and expand to reach the Tainted Cloud sect, you two can freely move between the 2 sects. Stella smiled as her hair was ruffled. I like this part of it more. Diana reacted differently as she shook her head again. That's absurd. Forget pills. Do you know how much you could make creating permanent portals between sects? Hell, even routes between cities in the same sect would boost trade. I know, Ashlock assured her. He had seen the effects of globalization back on Earth and couldn't even imagine how absurd it would be if portals were involved. So what
should we do for a few days while we wait for your roots to evolve? Stella asked as she leaned against his bark. Ashlock was about to suggest they rest or continue studying their bloodlines, but then he remembered there was someone he wanted to introduce them to. Again. Talking of becoming a tree, how would you two like to meet Knox again? Stella's happy expression immediately soured. Ash, what did you do? Nothing much, Ashlock said innocently. I needed a guardian tree for Ashfallen City and thought a nascent soul realm shadow tree would be a perfect fit, so I planted Knox's cursed-filled infant soul near the city. Stella shrugged off his root and stood up with a grim expression. Where the hell is my axe?